At dawn, the streets of Krakow are silent, but the silence is not peace. Behind a wall shaped like gravestones, a city within a city is already awake. A mother counts her last crumbs of bread while a child presses his ear to the window, listening for boots on stone. Somewhere nearby, a shot echoes, sharp and final, and no one screams anymore because screaming has learned it changes nothing. This is not a camp. Not yet. This is where the world learned how to disappear people without gas chambers, without smoke, without the machinery of death everyone would later recognize. Here, life was dismantled slowly, apartment by apartment, name by name, until fear became routine and survival felt like guilt. The ghetto was not a holding pen. It was a rehearsal. Every list, every ration card, every forced smile at a German checkpoint was teaching the system how far it could go. By the time the trains arrived, the lesson was complete. What happened behind these walls did not end here. It was carried forward, refined, and perfected. To understand the camps, you have to begin in this place, where hope was starved quietly, and the shadow of extermination first learned how to move without being seen. Chapter 1. Krakow before the darkness. The bells of St. Mary's Basilica rise into the cold morning air, their sound rolling across Krakow's rooftops as it has for centuries. Horses pull carts over cobblestones worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Shopkeepers lift metal shutters. Bakers slide loaves from ovens, the smell of fresh bread drifting through narrow streets. Children run ahead of their parents, laughter echoing briefly before dissolving into the city's daily rhythm. Nothing here suggests that this city, alive and breathing, is already standing on the edge of catastrophe. Nothing warns that within weeks, these same streets will carry boots instead of footsteps, orders instead of greetings, fear instead of routine. Krakow does not yet know it is being watched, measured, and prepared for destruction. For hundreds of years, Jewish life has been woven into the fabric of this city so tightly that it is impossible to imagine Krakow without it. Jewish families have lived here since the Middle Ages, surviving fires, plagues, partitions, and wars. By the eve of the Second World War, more than 60,000 Jews call Krakow home, nearly 1/4 of the city's population. They are not outsiders. They are shop owners on Florianska Street, lawyers with offices near the main square, factory workers, tailors, teachers, writers, musicians. Their voices fill markets and classrooms. Their labor fuels workshops and factories. Their prayers rise daily alongside church bells. This is not a marginal community living in the shadows. It is a beating heart within the city itself. In Kazimierz, the historic Jewish district, life unfolds with familiar intimacy. Synagogues stand shoulder to shoulder with homes and businesses, their walls darkened by age and candle smoke. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of wax and old books, fingers tracing Hebrew letters worn smooth by centuries of touch. Children attend Cheddar's and modern Jewish schools alike, learning scripture in the morning and mathematics in the afternoon. Yiddish mingles with Polish and German in cafes where newspapers are unfolded and debates stretch late into the night. There is argument, laughter, disagreement, ambition. There is life, loud and imperfect, and utterly ordinary. Jewish institutions in Krakow are numerous and deeply established. There are hospitals funded by Jewish charities, theaters staging Yiddish plays, sports clubs where young men train and compete, political organizations ranging from socialist movements to Zionist groups. Newspapers circulate daily, carrying news from Warsaw, Berlin, and beyond. Jewish professors lecture at universities. Jewish merchants trade across borders. Jewish musicians perform in concert halls where applause does not ask about religion. This is not a sealed-off world. It is interdependent, inseparable from the Polish city that surrounds it. The city itself thrives on this integration. Krakow in the late 1930s is not wealthy, but it is alive with purpose. Streetcars clang along their routes. Factories hum with machinery. Students crowd lecture halls. dreaming of futures that stretch forward rather than collapse inward. Cafes smell of coffee and tobacco, conversations drifting between art, politics, and football scores. On Sabbath evenings, families gather around tables heavy with bread and wine, candles reflecting in windows that face streets where neighbors pass without fear. The city feels permanent. It feels rooted. It feels safe enough to take for granted. Yet beneath this sense of continuity, the ground is already shifting. Across Europe, shadows are lengthening. Anti-Jewish laws in Germany have begun to reshape lives just across the border. Refugees arrive quietly, carrying stories of broken windows, burned synagogues, and neighbors turned hostile overnight. In Krakow, these warnings feel distant, troubling, but abstract. Poland is sovereign. Krakow is historic, respected, cultured. Surely the madness gathering in Berlin cannot simply cross borders and erase centuries of life. Surely history has taught the world something. In the summer of 1939, the tension becomes harder to ignore. Radios crackle with anxious voices. Newspapers print cautious headlines. Mobilization notices appear on walls. Young men drill in uniforms that still smell new, their boots stiff and unfamiliar. There is fear, yes, but also confidence. Poland has allies. Europe will not allow another war to swallow cities whole. Families reassure one another with familiar phrases, spoken more out of need than belief. It will pass. It always passes. Then, before dawn on the 1st of September, the illusion shatters. The sky over Poland fills with the sound of engines. Not the distant hum of industry, but the low, vibrating roar of aircraft. Explosions ripple across cities and railways. The war arrives not as a declaration, but as a force, sudden and overwhelming. Within days, German troops push deep into Polish territory. Refugees flood roads. Smoke darkens horizons that once promised stability. Krakow, spared heavy fighting due to its cultural value, falls quickly. There is no heroic last stand here, only the cold precision of occupation. German soldiers march into the city with mechanical confidence. Their uniforms are immaculate. Their rifles gleam. Flags bearing the swastika unfurl over buildings that once symbolized Polish history and pride. Orders are posted in sharp, unfamiliar typography. Curfews are announced. Radios are confiscated. Authority changes hands without asking permission. The city holds its breath as the rules of daily life are rewritten in real time. At first, the changes seem manageable. Jews are ordered to register. Businesses are inspected. New regulations appear with numbing speed. Jewish professionals are dismissed from public positions. Jewish shops are marked, then boycotted. Identification papers become more important than names. These measures are framed as temporary, administrative, necessary. They are meant to feel bureaucratic rather than brutal. Many still believe that compliance will bring stability, that order will protect families from worse outcomes. The word ghetto is not yet spoken aloud, but separation has already begun. The shock is not just political. It is deeply personal. Neighbors who once greeted one another now look away, unsure of how association might be judged. Friends hesitate before speaking in public. Familiar streets feel altered, as though something essential has been removed without leaving visible damage. Fear does not arrive as panic. It seeps in quietly, settling into routines, changing how people walk, how they speak, how they breathe. For Jewish families, the rupture is profound. Generations of belonging are suddenly questioned. Centuries of rootedness are reduced to a racial category stamped onto documents. The same synagogues that once echoed with prayer now feel exposed, vulnerable. The same schools that prepared children for futures of study and work begin to wonder whether those futures still exist at all. Parents lower their voices at night. Children learn to sense danger without being able to name it. Still, life continues because it must. Shops open under new restrictions. Classes resume with fewer students. Religious services are held with cautious determination. People cling to normalcy not because they believe in it, but because abandoning it feels like surrender. Every routine becomes an act of quiet resistance against the growing certainty that something irreversible is unfolding. The Germans moved deliberately. Krakow is chosen as the capital of the general government, the administrative heart of occupied Poland. This decision will seal the city's fate. A vision begins to form in the minds of Nazi planners, one that does not include Jewish life as part of Krakow's future. The city is to be reshaped, purified, reorganized, and purification, in the Nazi imagination, requires removal. At this stage, removal still sounds like relocation, expulsion, reduction, words that suggest displacement rather than annihilation. But history will show that these early steps are not separate from what follows. They are its foundation. The policies tested here will be refined elsewhere. The lessons learned in Krakow will echo through ghettos, camps, and killing fields yet to come. What makes this moment so haunting is not just what will happen, but what still exists. The synagogues are standing. The schools are open. Families are intact. The city still smells of bread in the morning and ink in newspapers. The future has not yet collapsed. It is this closeness, this fragile overlap between life and destruction, that gives Krakow its tragic weight. The darkness does not descend all at once. It advances step by step, wearing the mask of order. As the occupation settles in, as lists grow longer and rights grow fewer, an unspoken question hangs over the city. How much of this can be endured? How far can life be narrowed before it breaks? The answer has not yet revealed itself. But somewhere beyond these streets, beyond these walls and prayers and routines, a machinery is already turning. And soon, Krakow will be forced to confront what that machinery was built to do. Chapter 2, September 1939. The occupation begins. The first German trucks roll into Krakow before the city fully understands that the war has already been lost. Engines idle in the streets, low and constant, a mechanical growl that feels out of place among church bells and horse carts. Soldiers jump down, boots striking stone in sharp, practiced rhythm. Orders are barked, clipped and confident, echoing off walls that have heard many languages before, but never this one spoken with such authority. Civilians watch from doorways and windows, some frozen, some curious, some already afraid. The occupation does not arrive with chaos. It arrives with control. Within hours, the city's rhythms begin to fracture. Polish officials are dismissed or arrested. Police stations change hands. German flags replace Polish ones on government buildings, hanging heavy and deliberate, as if meant to announce permanence. Loudspeakers crackle to life, announcing new rules in a language many residents barely understand. Curfews are imposed. Public gatherings are restricted. Radios are confiscated. The war, once something distant and theoretical, now presses into daily life with immediate consequences. For Jewish residents, the shift is almost instantaneous. Registration orders appear, demanding names, addresses, professions. Identity cards must now be carried at all times. The act of walking through one's own neighborhood becomes something to plan rather than assume. Shops owned by Jews are vandalized or marked. Some windows are smashed, not during riots, but methodically as warnings. Others remain intact, protected only by uncertainty about what tomorrow will bring. German soldiers move through the city with an air of entitlement, as though Krakow has always belonged to them. They enter cafes and restaurants, pushing locals aside, laughing loudly, claiming space. Jewish customers notice the change immediately. Conversations fall quiet when uniforms appear. Eyes lower. Hands grip papers a little tighter. The presence of armed men reshapes even the most ordinary interactions, turning streets into corridors of risk. Anti-Jewish measures follow one another with dizzying speed. Jews are barred from certain professions. Lawyers and doctors are dismissed. Teachers are removed from schools. Jewish students are expelled from universities that their families once celebrated as symbols of achievement and belonging. The message is unmistakable. Jewish life is no longer considered part of Krakow's future. It is something to be managed, reduced, and eventually removed. Public humiliation becomes policy. Jews are forced to perform degrading labor in full view of neighbors, scrubbing streets, hauling debris, clearing snow with bare hands while German soldiers watch and laugh. These acts are not random cruelty. They are deliberate performances, designed to reshape how Jews see themselves and how others see them. Dignity is targeted first, because a population stripped of dignity is easier to control. Fear begins to settle into the city like a persistent fog. It does not scream. It whispers. It tells people to walk faster, to speak less, to memorize rules that change without warning. It teaches children to be quiet in ways children should never have to learn. Parents begin to measure risk not in abstract terms, but in footsteps, glances, uniforms seen at the wrong moment. The Jewish community tries to respond with organization, believing, as so many will, that structure might offer protection. Community leaders attempt to negotiate, to comply, to anticipate demands before they escalate. Religious leaders urge calm and unity. Families cling to routine as if it might anchor them against the current pulling them forward. But each concession only creates space for the next demand. Confiscations begin. Jewish property is seized under the guise of regulation and necessity. Businesses are taken over by German administrators or handed to non-Jewish owners. Homes are entered and searched. Valuables disappear. What cannot be taken officially is often taken anyway, slipping into pockets during inspections that are anything but orderly. Loss becomes cumulative, grinding, difficult to track because it happens in pieces. The streets themselves begin to change character. Posters appear warning against interaction with Jews. Language hardens. Words once spoken casually are replaced with bureaucratic labels. Jew becomes a category, a problem, a statistic. This shift matters. Once people are reduced to classifications, it becomes easier to move them, confine them, erase them. The occupation understands this instinctively. Violence, when it occurs, is sudden and often arbitrary. A soldier strikes a man for not stepping aside quickly enough. Another fires a shot into the air to scatter a crowd. Sometimes the shot is not into the air. There is rarely an explanation. There does not need to be one. The randomness itself becomes a weapon, teaching the population that safety is never guaranteed, that obedience offers no real protection. At night, the city sounds different. Footsteps echo louder. Doors close more carefully. The absence of street lights deepens shadows, turning familiar corners into unknown territory. Families gather close, speaking in low voices, listening for noises that might signal a knock, a raid, an arrest. Sleep becomes shallow, interrupted by dreams that feel too close to waking life. German administrators move quickly to reshape Krakow's social order. Jewish councils are discussed, then imposed, not as a gesture of autonomy, but as a tool of control. The idea is simple and devastating. Force Jewish leaders to administer German policy, to deliver bad news, to compile lists, to manage scarcity. Responsibility is shifted downward, creating impossible moral dilemmas that will haunt survivors long after the war ends. Meanwhile, non-Jewish residents watch the transformation with mixed reactions. Some are horrified. Some are relieved that they are not the target. Some take advantage of new opportunities as Jewish businesses are seized and positions vacated. The occupation thrives on this fragmentation, on the quiet calculations people make to survive. Resistance feels dangerous. Silence feels safer. And silence spreads. The Germans study Krakow carefully. They take notes. They test policies. Which restrictions provoke protest? Which ones are accepted? How much pressure is required before compliance becomes routine? The city becomes a laboratory, not for science, but for social engineering. The answers gathered here will shape actions across occupied Europe. For Jewish families, time begins to compress. Futures that once stretched forward now feel foreshortened, uncertain. Young people abandon plans for careers and education. Older generations struggle to make sense of a world that seems to have discarded the lessons of history overnight. The feeling of belonging that once defined Jewish life in Krakow erodes, replaced by the sensation of being tolerated temporarily, conditionally, at someone else's discretion. Rumors circulate constantly. Deportations in other cities. Ghettos forming elsewhere. Executions carried out beyond public view. It is difficult to separate truth from fear. German authorities exploit this confusion, offering reassurances one day and punishments the next. Stability becomes impossible. Anxiety becomes the background noise of existence. And yet, even now, there is disbelief. The scale of what is coming remains unimaginable. People tell themselves that Krakow's history, its cultural significance, its reputation, will protect it. That reason will prevail. That the world will intervene. That things cannot possibly go much further than this. These thoughts are not naive. They are human. They are born from the need to believe that suffering has limits. But the occupation has no intention of stopping. With each passing week, new restrictions appear, each one narrowing the space in which Jewish life can exist. Movement is restricted. Transportation is limited. Access to food becomes more difficult. Hunger begins to edge into households that have never known it. The physical toll mirrors the psychological one, weakening bodies as well as resolve. By the end of 1939, Krakow is no longer the city it was just months earlier. The transformation is not complete, but the direction is unmistakable. The structures of segregation are being assembled piece by piece. The mechanisms of control are in place. The language of exclusion has become normalized. What began as occupation is quietly evolving into something more permanent, more systematic, more lethal. The walls have not yet been built. The word ghetto has not yet been stamped onto maps. But the logic that will make them inevitable is already at work. Separation has been introduced. Dehumanization has been practiced. Obedience has been enforced through fear. The city is being prepared, and so are the people within it. As winter approaches, Krakow settles into a new, uneasy normal. Snow covers the streets, softening the outlines of buildings and footprints alike. It almost looks peaceful. But beneath the surface, the occupation tightens its grip, and the space left for Jewish life grows smaller with each passing day. Soon, the Germans will no longer be satisfied with controlling where Jews work, what they own, or how they move. Soon, they will decide where Jews are allowed to exist at all. Chapter 3. Purging the capital of the general government. The announcement is delivered without ceremony, as if it were an ordinary administrative update rather than a sentence passed on an entire city. Krakow has been chosen as the capital of the general government, the administrative heart of occupied Poland. For German officials, this is a strategic and symbolic victory. For the people who live here, especially the Jews, it is the moment when uncertainty hardens into dread. Capitals are meant to represent power, order, and permanence. In the Nazi vision, there is no room in such a city for Jewish life. Hans Frank arrives with his entourage like a conquering monarch returning to claim a throne. He installs himself in Wawel Castle, a place saturated with Polish history, and from its stone halls issues decrees that will reshape Krakow at every level. The castle's ancient walls now echo with plans not of preservation, but of removal. Frank's vision is explicit and chilling. Krakow is to become a German city, orderly, Aryan, cleansed. Jews are not citizens to be governed. They are obstacles to be eliminated. The shift is immediate and unmistakable. German officials begin referring to Krakow as a city that must be made free of Jews, a phrase that carries bureaucratic calm and genocidal intent in equal measure. The language matters. It transforms human beings into a logistical problem, something to be solved through policy rather than acknowledged as lives being dismantled. The word purge enters the administrative vocabulary, not whispered, but spoken plainly. Expulsions begin quietly, then accelerate. Jewish families receive notices ordering them to leave Krakow within days, sometimes hours. They are told to pack what they can carry. Furniture, businesses, libraries, heirlooms accumulated over generations must be abandoned. The streets fill with carts piled high with bedding, cookware, clothing, Torah scrolls wrapped hurriedly in cloth. Children clutch toys they will soon lose. Elderly men walk slowly, leaning on canes, unsure if they will survive the journey at all. The soundscape of the city changes. Where once there were conversations and commerce, now there are shouted orders, crying children, the scrape of carts over stone. Train stations become places of terror. Platforms crowd with people who do not know where they are being sent, only that they are no longer wanted where they stand. Guards rush them forward, impatient, dismissive, sometimes violent. The smell of coal smoke mixes with sweat and fear, clinging to clothing long after the trains depart. These expulsions are not random. They are carefully calculated. Jews deemed economically useful are temporarily spared. Skilled laborers, craftsmen, and those whose work directly serve German interests are allowed to remain, for now. Everyone else is surplus. This distinction fractures the Jewish community internally, creating painful hierarchies of value imposed from outside. Survival becomes conditional, measured not by humanity, but by utility. Families are torn apart by these classifications. A father may be allowed to stay while his parents are expelled. A skilled worker's permit might save one household while condemning the family next door. The guilt that follows survival is immediate and corrosive. People learn to be grateful for privileges that should never exist, even as they mourn those forced away. Those expelled are sent to surrounding towns and villages already overwhelmed with refugees. Conditions there are brutal. Housing is scarce. Food is rationed. Disease spreads quickly. Local populations, themselves struggling under occupation, are often hostile or fearful. The uprooted arrive as strangers, carrying the stigma imposed by German propaganda, stripped of status and security. Many will not survive long enough to see what comes next. Inside Krakow, the city grows quieter as Jewish neighborhoods empty. Shops close. Windows are boarded. Synagogues fall silent. Streets that once bustled with life now feel hollow, as though something essential has been removed. For those Jews who remain, the emptiness is terrifying. Every departure feels like a warning, a rehearsal for something worse. German authorities present these measures as orderly and lawful. Paperwork is meticulously filed. Statistics are recorded. Progress is tracked. How many Jews removed? How many remain? How much property seized? The language of administration masks the violence of displacement, turning suffering into numbers on a page. This efficiency will become a defining feature of what follows. The non-Jewish population is drawn into the process in subtle and overt ways. Vacated apartments are reassigned. Businesses change hands. Positions once held by Jewish professionals are filled by others. Some accept these changes with discomfort, others with relief, others with enthusiasm. The occupation relies on this spectrum of response, knowing that normalization is its greatest ally. Fear deepens for those still inside the city. Permits become lifelines, renewed monthly, sometimes weekly, always precarious. A missing stamp, an expired document, a bureaucratic error can mean expulsion or arrest. People begin to organize their lives around paperwork rather than plans. Identity is reduced to what can be proven on demand. The German police and SS increase their presence, their patrols more frequent, their authority absolute. Raids become common. Apartments are searched for unregistered Jews, hidden relatives, undeclared possessions. The knock on the door becomes a sound that freezes blood, echoing long after it fades. People rehearse responses in their minds, practicing calm while bracing for violence. Public messaging grows harsher. Posters warn against aiding Jews. Penalties are announced, severe and non-negotiable. The intent is clear. Isolation is policy. Jews are to be cut off not only physically, but socially, emotionally, psychologically. When people disappear, their absence is meant to feel normal. Despite this, there are moments of humanity that refuse to vanish. Neighbors whisper goodbyes. Friends slip food into pockets. Rabbis offer blessings at train platforms, their voices breaking as they speak words meant for journeys that once promised hope. These acts do not change the outcome, but they preserve something essential, a reminder that cruelty has not erased compassion entirely. For German planners, Krakow is becoming what they envisioned. The Jewish population is shrinking. The city is being reshaped to reflect Nazi ideology. But the process is not complete. Too many Jews remain. Too much life persists. The solution, as they see it, requires a more concentrated approach. Discussions begin about containment rather than dispersal. If Jews cannot be fully removed yet, they can be confined, controlled, isolated in a single district, away from the German heart of the city. The idea is not new. Ghettos have already been established elsewhere. Krakow will follow. The question is not if, but when. As winter deepens, those still allowed to remain in Krakow sense the tightening noose. Movement is further restricted. Resources grow scarcer. The city feels smaller, more hostile. Streets that once belonged to everyone now feel dangerous, segmented, watched. The knowledge settles in quietly but firmly. Being allowed to stay is not safety. It is postponement. The purge has taught the occupation valuable lessons. How quickly people comply when faced with overwhelming force. How effectively communities can be fractured by selective privileges. How displacement can be framed as necessity rather than crime. These lessons will be applied again, with greater precision and far deadlier consequences. By the time the expulsions slow, Krakow has been transformed. Not purified, as the Nazis would claim, but wounded. Its Jewish presence reduced, its social fabric torn, its future narrowed. Those who remain live in a city that no longer feels like home, haunted by the absence of neighbors and the certainty that absence is the goal. The stage is now set for the next phase. Removal has proven effective, but incomplete. Control has been established, but not absolute. To finish the task, the Germans will need walls, boundaries, and total authority over where Jews live, move, and die. The purge has cleared the ground. What comes next will build upon it, brick by brick, until separation becomes imprisonment, and imprisonment becomes something far worse. Chapter 4. The creation of the Krakow Ghetto. The order arrives quietly, folded into official notices, and whispered through corridors of fear before it is fully understood. Jews in Krakow are to relocate. Not leave the city this time, but move within it. A specific district has been designated. Podgorsk, across the river. A place many Jewish families have never lived, never visited, never imagined as home. The language is deceptively calm. Resettlement, consolidation, organization. But beneath the words lies a truth that is immediately felt. This is not movement. This is confinement. Winter still clings to the city as families begin to pack, once again. This time, there is nowhere farther to go. Apartments that held generations must be abandoned for rooms shared with strangers. Entire households are reduced to what can be carried by hand or pulled on carts through streets already heavy with tension. The sound of footsteps grows constant, echoing with urgency as people move under guard, watched by soldiers who treat the process as routine. For the Jews of Krakow, this is the moment when uncertainty crystallizes into inevitability. Podgorsk is unprepared for what is about to be forced into it. A district designed for a fraction of the population it is about to absorb. Its buildings are old, cramped, poorly maintained. Yet into this space, more than 15,000 Jews are ordered to relocate. Families are assigned to apartments without regard for size or condition. A single room may hold multiple households. Privacy vanishes overnight. So does dignity. Beds are shared in shifts. Kitchens become battlegrounds for scarce resources. Air itself feels insufficient. As people arrive, the physical transformation begins. Walls are erected with chilling symbolism. Their tops are shaped like Jewish tombstones, a design choice that is no accident. It is a message. carved into brick and mortar. This place is meant to resemble a grave. Gates are installed. Guards take their positions. The boundaries of Jewish existence are no longer abstract or bureaucratic. They are physical, immovable, and enforced at gunpoint. The ghetto is sealed in March of 1941. Overnight, Krakow becomes two cities. One open, expansive, and increasingly German. The other compressed, suffocating, and condemned. Crossing between them requires permits that are rarely granted and easily revoked. The river that once connected neighborhoods now feels like a dividing line between worlds. Those inside the ghetto watch life continue on the other side, unreachable, like a memory fading in real time. Inside the walls, the senses are assaulted. The smell of unwashed bodies mixes with damp plaster and spoiled food. The sound of coughing never seems to stop, echoing through stairwells and thin walls. Hunger becomes a constant companion, gnawing and sharp, turning thoughts inward and desperate. Official food rations are starvation level, designed not to sustain life, but to erode it slowly. Smuggling becomes essential. Children crawl through gaps, slip under fences, risk bullets for crusts of bread. Disease spreads quickly in the overcrowded conditions. Typhus stalks the streets invisibly, carried by lice that thrive where soap and clean water are luxuries. Doctors work without supplies, making impossible choices about who can be treated and who cannot. Hospitals overflow. Death becomes familiar, almost routine, its presence marked by carts carrying bodies through streets that have no space left for grief. Yet even here, life refuses to vanish entirely. People organize where they can. Schools operate in secret, children huddled around books that represent defiance as much as education. Religious services continue quietly, prayers whispered rather than sung. Artists sketch scenes of ghetto life, knowing they may not survive, but believing the truth must be recorded. These acts are small, fragile, but they matter. They are assertions of humanity in a place designed to erase it. The Judenrat, the Jewish Council, is forced into existence under German command. Its members are tasked with administering the ghetto, distributing rations, organizing labor, compiling lists. They operate under constant threat, knowing that refusal means death, but compliance means participation in a system built to destroy their own people. Every decision carries unbearable weight. Who receives food? Who is assigned work? Whose name appears on which document? There are no good choices, only varying degrees of harm. German patrols move through the ghetto with impunity. Violence is unpredictable. A beating for stepping out of line. A shooting for hesitation. Sometimes for nothing at all. The randomness is intentional. It keeps fear sharp, ever present. People learn to read moods, to anticipate danger from the tilt of a helmet or the tone of a voice. Survival becomes a skill honed daily under pressure. Children suffer most visibly. Their bodies shrink. Their faces lose softness, replaced by expressions too old for their years. They learn the geography of danger instinctively, knowing which streets are watched, which corners offer cover. Play becomes rare. Laughter, when it appears, feels almost shocking. Parents watch their children change and feel a helplessness deeper than hunger. The ghetto is not hidden. It is visible, deliberately so. Non-Jewish residents pass its walls daily. Some look away. Some stare. Some grow accustomed to the sight of confinement as part of the city's landscape. Normalization is one of the ghetto's most insidious effects. What should provoke outrage instead becomes background. German officials monitor the ghetto closely, adjusting policies as conditions worsen. Starvation is not a failure of planning. It is the plan. Weak bodies are easier to control. Desperation fractures solidarity. Hunger becomes another weapon, as effective as guns and walls. The ghetto is not merely a holding area. It is an instrument of slow destruction. Despite everything, rumors circulate. Of camps, of mass killings elsewhere, of trains that do not return. Information trickles in through smugglers and whispered conversations, fragmentary and terrifying. Some dismiss it as exaggeration. unable to comprehend the scale. Others believe and feel the weight of that knowledge settle heavily on their chests. The ghetto, once presented as temporary, begins to feel like a prelude rather than an endpoint. Time behaves strangely inside the walls. Days blur together, marked less by calendars than by hunger and fear. The future shrinks. Planning beyond the next meal feels impossible. Yet people still mark birthdays quietly, still fall in love, still argue, still hope in ways that feel irrational but necessary. Hope becomes an act of resistance, even as it grows harder to sustain. Outside the ghetto, German plans continue to evolve. The system is working, from their perspective. Jews are isolated, controlled, reduced. The question now is not how to confine them, but what to do with them next. The ghetto has served its purpose as a testing ground, a place to refine methods of domination and deprivation. By the end of 1941, the Krakow Ghetto is no longer just a place. It is a condition, a state of existence defined by scarcity, fear, and waiting. Those inside sense that waiting itself is dangerous, that something worse is approaching. The walls that were built to contain them feel less like barriers and more like countdowns, marking time until the next decision is made. The city beyond the river glows at night, lights reflecting off windows that Jews can no longer enter. Inside the ghetto, darkness settles early. Candles flicker in cramped rooms, illuminating faces etched with exhaustion and resolve. No one knows exactly when the next blow will fall, but everyone feels it drawing closer. The creation of the ghetto was not the end of the story. It was the moment the story crossed a line from persecution into something far more final, and the shadows gathering within these walls are only beginning to move. Chapter 5: Daily Life Behind the Walls. Morning arrives in the Krakow Ghetto without ceremony. There is no gentle transition from sleep to day, no sense of renewal. Hunger wakes people before light does. The body learns quickly that food, not clocks, now dictates time. In overcrowded rooms, bodies shift and stir, careful not to step on one another, careful not to waste energy. Breath hangs heavy in the air, carrying the smell of damp clothing, unwashed skin, and smoke from makeshift stoves that burn whatever can be found. Outside, the ghetto exhales into another day of survival. Water is one of the first battles. Faucets run only at certain hours, and when they do, people line up with buckets, cans, anything that can hold liquid. The cold bites fingers raw as they wait, listening for boots, watching for guards. Every sound carries meaning now. A shout, a whistle, a sudden silence. The ghetto teaches its inhabitants to read the world like an animal reads weather, sensing danger before it fully appears. Food dominates every thought. Official rations are pitiful, calculated to weaken rather than sustain. Bread is dark, coarse, often moldy. Soup is thin, more rumor than nourishment. People count calories without knowing the word, learning instinctively how little the body can survive on before it begins to consume itself. Stomachs ache constantly, a dull pain that sharpens into desperation by afternoon. Hunger erodes patience, kindness, and hope, yet it also forges strange forms of cooperation. A crust shared, a spoonful saved, a favor remembered. Smuggling becomes the lifeline of the ghetto. Children, small and agile, slip through gaps in walls, crawl through sewers, dart past distracted guards. They return with potatoes, flour, sometimes nothing at all. Each trip is a gamble with death. Mothers wait in silence, hands clenched, counting minutes like prayers. When a child returns, thin arms wrapped around food, relief crashes through the room like a wave. When a child does not return, grief is swallowed quickly, because grief requires energy, and energy is scarce. Disease moves through the ghetto with quiet efficiency. Typhus, tuberculosis, dysentery. Names whispered with dread. Overcrowding and malnutrition create perfect conditions for illness, and medicine is almost non-existent. Doctors improvise, using knowledge where supplies fail them. They diagnose by touch, by smell, by the look in a patient's eyes. They choose who might live and who is already lost, choices that will haunt them long after the ghetto is gone. Hospitals overflow. Beds are shared. Hallways become wards. The dead are wrapped in sheets and carried out at dawn, bodies stacked on carts like cargo. Children learn the sight early, absorbing it as part of life. Death loses its shock, then its meaning, becoming another presence that must be managed. Funerals are brief, often silent, sometimes impossible. Mourning becomes private, internal, compressed in a moment stolen between tasks. Work is mandatory for those deemed able. Labor detachments leave the ghetto, each day under guard, marching across bridges into the city that once belonged to them. They clean streets, repair roads, load cargo, serve German needs with exhausted bodies. The work is brutal, the hours long, the beatings arbitrary. But work permits offer a fragile protection. To be useful is to be temporarily alive. This knowledge warps the idea of survival into something transactional, something deeply painful to accept. Inside the ghetto, those without work permits live with constant anxiety. Every inspection threatens deportation or worse. People hide when rumors of selection spread, squeezing into crawl spaces, behind false walls, under floorboards. Silence becomes a skill. Breathing becomes something to control. Children are taught not to cry, not to cough, not to exist too loudly. Fear shapes behavior until it feels natural. The Jewish council struggles to maintain some order amid chaos. Ration cards are distributed. Housing assignments are enforced. Complaints pile up with no solutions. Council members age rapidly, faces lined by responsibility they never sought. They are despised by some, pitted by others, trapped by all. Their offices are places of pleading and despair, where people beg for exemptions, for food, for work, for time. The council can offer very little, and what little it offers often comes at a terrible cost. Despite everything, daily routines form, because humans cannot survive without structure. People sweep floors, even when dirt returns immediately. Clothes are mended repeatedly, threadbare fabric coaxed into usefulness again and again. Hair is cut. Shoes are repaired. These acts are not vanity. They are resistance against the erasure of self. To care for one's appearance, even slightly, is to insist on being more than a prisoner. Education continues in whispers. Teachers gather children in apartments, books hidden beneath clothing. Lessons are short, quiet, urgent. Reading, arithmetic, history. The idea that knowledge still matters becomes a form of rebellion. Children absorb these moments intensely, aware that learning itself is forbidden. Parents watch, torn between pride and fear, knowing that discovery could mean death, but also knowing that ignorance feels like surrender. Religion adapts to confinement. Synagogues operate covertly or not at all. Prayer takes place in kitchens and basements, men rocking back and forth, murmuring words memorized long before walls existed. Faith shifts from public ritual to private endurance. Some find comfort in belief. Others feel abandoned. Both responses coexist, often within the same person, changing from day to day. Art survives in fragments. Songs are sung softly, melodies carrying memory and longing. Poets write on scraps of paper. Painters sketch scenes they may never see again, capturing faces hollowed by hunger, streets crowded with shadows. These creations are rarely meant for audiences. They are acts of witness, proof that someone saw, someone felt, someone understood. Children grow older quickly. Their bodies are small, but their eyes are alert, calculating. They understand trade, danger, and loss with alarming fluency. Play, when it happens, is brief and intense, laughter bursting out before being swallowed by caution. Parents mourn the childhood slipping away, even as they are grateful their children are learning how to survive. Relationships strain under pressure. Couples argue over food, over risk, over decisions that cannot be undone. Friendships fracture and reform. Trust becomes precious and fragile. At the same time, bonds deepen in unexpected ways. People who were once acquaintances become family. Shared suffering forges connections that comfort, even as it scars. Violence remains unpredictable. German patrols enter the ghetto at will, conducting searches, beating residents, sometimes killing for reasons that are never explained. Each incursion reinforces the lesson that life inside the walls is conditional, provisional, subject to sudden termination. Afterward, people pick up the pieces, clean blood from stairwells, resume routines because there is no alternative. The psychological toll is immense. Depression spreads quietly. Some stop eating not because food is unavailable, but because hope has drained away. Others cling fiercely to life, driven by stubborn refusal to disappear. Nightmares are common. Sleep offers no escape. Dreams replay losses, amplify fears, blur into waking hours. The mind becomes another battlefield. Yet moments of humanity persist, stubborn and luminous. A birthday marked with a candle stub and a whispered song. A wedding performed in secret. Vows spoken quickly, urgently, as if time itself were listening. A newborn wrapped in rags, greeted with tears that mix joy and terror. These moments do not deny reality. They defy it. Outside the ghetto, seasons change as they always have. Snow melts. Flowers bloom. The river flows. Inside, time feels suspended, stretched thin, heavy with waiting. People sense that the ghetto is not a destination, but a stage. The rumors grow louder, more consistent. Trains, camps, places from which letters do not return. The idea that the ghetto is temporary begins to feel like a cruel joke. Daily life behind the walls teaches lessons quickly and brutally. That hunger can become a constant companion. That fear can be normalized. That survival can require compromises once thought impossible. But it also teaches something else, quieter but no less powerful. That even under conditions designed to destroy humanity, people continue to think, feel, love, and remember. As night falls again, candles flicker in darkened rooms. Families huddle close, conserving warmth, conserving strength. Somewhere beyond the walls, decisions are being made by people who will never see these faces, never hear these voices. Inside the ghetto, life continues, fragile and defiant, unaware of exactly when the next phase will begin, only knowing that the current one cannot last. The routines of survival, honed day after day, are about to be tested by forces far more final than hunger and walls. Chapter 6. The Judenrat and the Weight of Impossible Choices. The summons does not arrive as a request. It arrives as an order. Names are posted. Men are told to report immediately. There is no explanation, only the certainty that refusal is not an option. In the Krakow Ghetto, power now wears a strange and devastating shape. It forces victims to become administrators of their own suffering, to carry out commands under threat of death, to choose between compliance and annihilation with no space left in between. This is how the Judenrat is born. The Jewish Council is presented by German authorities as a practical necessity. Someone must organize housing. Someone must distribute food. Someone must maintain order. Someone must provide lists. The Germans insist this structure will bring efficiency, stability, even protection. But beneath the language of administration lies a brutal truth. The Judenrat exists to absorb blame, to translate cruelty into procedure, to turn violence into paperwork. It is not a shield. It is a mechanism. The men appointed to the council are not collaborators in the way history will later reduce them to labels. They are community leaders, professionals, respected figures, people who once organized charities, schools, synagogues. Many believe, at first, that cooperation might save lives. That reasoned negotiation might soften German policy. That compliance might buy time. Time, in this world, feels like the most valuable currency left. From the moment they take their seats, the pressure is relentless. Orders arrive daily, sometimes hourly. Provide a certain number of workers. Deliver a list of names. Vacate an apartment. Reduce food rations further. The demands are often contradictory, impossible to fulfill without harming someone. Every decision produces suffering. Every delay invites punishment. Council members are beaten, threatened, humiliated, reminded constantly that their lives hang by a thread. The offices of the Judenrat become places of desperation. People line up for hours, clutching documents, ration cards, work permits, letters of recommendation that mean less with each passing day. They beg for food, for exemptions, for housing, for their children. Inside, council members listen, knowing that helping one person often means condemning another. Their faces grow older week by week, eyes hollowed by exhaustion and moral injury. One of the council's most agonizing tasks is the allocation of labor. Work permits offer temporary protection from deportation and violence. To assign work is, in effect, to choose who might live a little longer. Skilled laborers are prioritized. The young and able-bodied are selected. The sick, the elderly, the very young are left behind. These decisions are not framed as death sentences, but everyone understands what they mean. Survival becomes bureaucratic. Alongside the Judenrat, another institution takes shape, one even more controversial and painful. The Jewish police. Officially created to maintain order within the ghetto, they wear armbands, carry batons, and enforce regulations under German supervision. Many join out of desperation, believing the role will protect their families. Others are coerced. Some hope to mitigate violence from within. All are quickly trapped in a system designed to destroy them. The presence of Jewish policemen fractures the community. They are seen enforcing curfews, breaking up gatherings, escorting people to labor detachments. During roundups, they knock on doors, sometimes dragging neighbors into the streets. Each action leaves a scar, not only on those targeted, but on those forced to carry it out. The Germans understand this dynamic well. By compelling Jews to police Jews, they deepen mistrust, erode solidarity, and spread guilt like a contagion. Inside the ghetto, rumors swirl constantly. Who is on the next list? Who has influence? Who can be bribed? Who cannot be trusted? The social fabric frays under the strain. Long-standing friendships dissolve. Accusations spread. People weigh every interaction, every word, wondering who might report them, who might betray them, who might help them at terrible personal risk. Council members live under constant surveillance. German officials monitor meetings, overturn decisions, issue new demands without warning. Failure is punished swiftly. Arrests are public. Beatings are visible. The message is clear. Authority here is borrowed and conditional. At any moment, it can be revoked along with life itself. The psychological toll is devastating. Council members carry the knowledge that their signatures may lead to deportations, beatings, death. At night, they replay decisions endlessly, imagining alternative choices that might have saved one more person, delayed one more tragedy. Sleep offers no relief. Dreams are crowded with faces from the waiting lines, eyes asking questions that have no answers. The Jewish police face a different, but equally corrosive burden. They are hated by some, feared by others, despised by themselves. Many begin the role, believing they can soften blows, issue warnings, help people hide. Some succeed briefly. Others are quickly consumed by the power they wield, using it to secure extra food, better housing, protection. The system rewards cruelty and punishes compassion. Those who resist orders are beaten or killed. Those who comply are despised and still not safe. German authorities manipulate these institutions with precision. They escalate demands gradually, testing how far they can push without provoking collapse. They issue quotas that force councils to choose which families will be destroyed. They encourage internal enforcement, then punish it publicly to reinforce fear. The Judenrat and Jewish police are not failures of moral character. They are outcomes of deliberate design. Among ordinary residents, the existence of these bodies creates constant tension. When food is distributed unevenly, resentment grows. When lists appear, panic spreads. People begin hiding documents, falsifying information, bribing officials with what little they have left. Corruption flourishes not because people are greedy, but because survival has been turned into competition. And yet, even within this system, acts of quiet resistance occur. Council members delay lists, falsify numbers, warn families before raids. Jewish policemen look the other way at critical moments, allow children to slip through crowds, accept punishment rather than carry out certain orders. These acts are small, risky, often unnoticed. They do not dismantle the system, but they preserve fragments of humanity within it. The Germans are not fooled. They respond with increased brutality. Council leaders are arrested, replaced, executed. Entire families are punished for individual acts of defiance. The message grows louder. Compassion will not be tolerated. The institutions meant to manage the ghetto are now instruments of terror, their limited autonomy stripped away as German control tightens. By mid-1942, the role of the Judenrat has shifted decisively. It is no longer about administration. It is about facilitating deportations. Orders arrive demanding lists for transport. Numbers are specified. Deadlines imposed. Failure is met with immediate violence. Council members understand now, fully, what cooperation has been leading toward. There is no longer any illusion of protection. Some resign in protest and are killed. Others continue, believing that even one life saved through delay or manipulation is worth the unbearable cost. There is no moral clarity here, only survival choices made under terror. History will judge these men harshly or sympathetically depending on distance and perspective, but inside the ghetto, judgment feels meaningless. What matters is the next order, the next list, the next knock on the door. The Jewish police, too, find themselves increasingly trapped. During deportations, they are forced to assist in rounding up neighbors, often their own relatives. Some break down publicly. Some refuse and are executed. Some carry out orders with visible despair. Others harden, becoming unrecognizable even to themselves. The system does not care which path they take. It consumes them all. As these institutions operate, trust within the ghetto erodes further. People withdraw inward, sharing plans only with immediate family. Collective action becomes difficult. Fear isolates individuals, making organized resistance nearly impossible. This fragmentation is not accidental. It is one of the system's greatest successes. And yet, beneath the fear and betrayal, something else simmers. Anger, awareness, the realization that compliance has not prevented suffering, only structured it. That lists lead to trains. That war permits delay but do not prevent death. That the Judenrat and Jewish police, however human their members may be, cannot save the community from what is coming. This realization spreads slowly, painfully. It will eventually give rise to new forms of resistance, quieter and louder, spiritual and armed. But for now, the weight of impossible choices dominates daily life. People wake knowing that someone they spoke to yesterday may be gone today, removed by a system that turns neighbors into administrators of fate. The Judenrat continues to meet. The Jewish police continue to patrol. The machinery grinds on. But the ghetto has crossed another threshold. Authority within its walls no longer offers even the illusion of safety. The Germans have learned what they needed to learn. How to govern through coercion. How to fracture communities from within. How to turn survival into collaboration without consent. The stage is being prepared for something far more final. Soon, the list will grow longer. The deadline shorter. The violence less selective. When that moment arrives, the institutions created to manage the ghetto will be powerless to stop it. They will stand at the center of the storm, bearing the unbearable knowledge that the choices they were forced to make were never meant to save the ghetto at all. Chapter 7: Forced Labor and the Economy of Survival. The whistle blows before dawn, slicing through the half-sleep of the ghetto like a blade. It is not a sound of work beginning, but of submission being renewed. Men and women rise slowly from floors and shared beds, bodies stiff, joints aching, stomachs already hollow. Outside, lines begin to form under armed guard. Heads are kept low. Papers are clutched tightly. A single missing stamp can mean everything. Forced labor is no longer just a requirement. It is the currency of survival. German policy in Krakow has become brutally clear. Jews are to be exploited until they are no longer useful. Labor is not a means of contribution. It is a method of extraction. Every able body is assessed, categorized, and assigned. Workshops inside the ghetto produce uniforms, boots, furniture. Labor detachments march out daily to factories, construction sites, warehouses. The work is relentless, the hours long, the conditions punishing. But a labor card offers something precious. Temporary protection. This knowledge reshapes behavior immediately. People lie about their skills, exaggerate experience, learn trades overnight. Tailors become metal workers. Clerks claim to be machinists. Young boys present themselves as older. The elderly try to appear strong. Weakness is dangerous. Illness is fatal. To be declared unfit is to disappear. Survival now depends on performance. The march to work becomes a daily ritual of fear. Guards count and recount heads, rifles resting casually against shoulders. Any irregularity is met with blows, sometimes with gunfire. The streets outside the ghetto feel hostile, foreign, even though many workers once walked them freely. Polish civilians avert their eyes or stare openly, unsure how to respond. The humiliation of being paraded as forced laborers cuts deep, carving away at identity. Work sites are places of exhaustion and terror. Supervisors shout in languages not everyone understands. Mistakes are punished harshly. A dropped tool, a mismeasured cut, a moment of rest can trigger violence. Hunger weakens concentration, making errors inevitable. Blood stains concrete floors. Broken fingers are ignored. Those who collapse are dragged aside, sometimes never seen again. Inside the ghetto, labor workshops operate under constant pressure to meet quotas. Raw materials are scarce. Tools are inadequate. Yet expectations remain high. Failure invites retaliation not just against workers, but against their families. Entire buildings can lose rations as punishment. The collective nature of suffering enforces compliance more effectively than individual threats ever could. The Jewish Council becomes deeply entangled in this labor system. It must assign workers, negotiate quotas, maintain productivity. Every list it produces feeds the German economy, while reinforcing control over the ghetto. Council members understand the terrible irony. By keeping people working, they may keep them alive. By keeping them alive, they may be extending a system designed to kill them later. There is no escape from this logic. Amid this machinery of exploitation, one factory begins to occupy a strange place in ghetto consciousness. Deutsche Emalware and Fabric. Oskar Schindler's enamelware factory. At first, it appears no different from others. Long hours, strict oversight, hard labor. But gradually, stories emerge that mark it as something else. Schindler employs Jews in large numbers. He intervenes on their behalf. He bends rules. He spends money to protect his workers. For those employed there, survival feels slightly less fragile. Schindler is not a saint in these early days. He is a businessman, opportunistic, self-interested. But within a system built on annihilation, even self-interest can become a shield. Workers assigned to his factory receive better rations, marginally safer conditions. Word spreads quickly. Being on Schindler's list becomes a coveted status, one that can mean the difference between life and death. It also fuels resentment and suspicion. Why them? Why not us? Elsewhere, conditions worsen steadily. As the war intensifies, German demands increase. Production targets rise. Punishments become harsher. Laborers are driven harder, treated as expendable components rather than human beings. Injuries accumulate. Exhaustion deepens. People begin to age visibly in weeks rather than years. For women, forced labor carries additional dangers. Sexual violence is an unspoken but constant threat. Supervisors exploit power with impunity. Complaints are useless, often fatal. Pregnancy becomes a nightmare. Mothers hide their condition as long as possible, binding their bodies, starving themselves to delay discovery. Children are liabilities now. To be pregnant is to risk everything. Children, too, are drawn into labor wherever possible. Those too young for official assignments carry messages, smuggle goods, run errands under fire. Their small size makes them useful. Their deaths are considered inconsequential by the system that uses them. Childhood disappears entirely, replaced by calculation and fear. Inside homes, the impact of labor is written on bodies. Calloused hands, bent backs, hollow eyes. Evenings are quiet, not from peace, but from exhaustion. People eat whatever they have managed to secure, often nothing. Conversation fades. Energy is conserved instinctively. Love becomes quieter, expressed in gestures rather than words. The German economy benefits enormously from this exploitation. Goods produced by Jewish labor flow outward, supporting the war effort. Profits are extracted. Efficiency is praised. The ghetto, from the outside, appears productive. From within, it is bleeding itself dry. This contradiction is intentional. The Nazis are not confused about the value of Jewish labor. They understand it perfectly. But they also understand that exploitation and extermination are not mutually exclusive. One can precede the other. Labor drains strength, breaks bodies, narrows resistance. When usefulness ends, elimination becomes easier. As months pass, rumors intensify. Workers hear whispers from other cities. Ghettos liquidated. Camps established. People who worked until the last moment still deported. The belief that labor guarantees survival begins to crack. Anxiety spreads. What happens when no one is needed anymore? Some begin to resist in small ways. Tools are sabotaged. Products are subtly damaged. Output is slowed. These acts are dangerous and often punished severely. But they represent a shift in thinking. Survival through compliance no longer feels certain. Defiance, however small, begins to regain meaning. Others cling desperately to work, believing that being useful is still their best chance. They volunteer for extra shifts, push their bodies beyond limits, ignore illness. They collapse at machines, are dragged away, replaced immediately. The system does not pause for grief. The labor detachments continue to march out each morning, but the mood changes. The initial fear has hardened into something heavier, a sense of being consumed piece by piece. People begin to understand that the ghetto is not a prison designed to hold them indefinitely. It is a processing zone where value is extracted before disposal. At night, conversations turn darker. Parents discuss what to do if children are selected. Friends debate hiding versus working. The idea of resistance, once unthinkable, begins to surface quietly. If labor leads only to death, what is there left to lose? For now, the economy of survival continues. Work permits are renewed. Lists are updated. Factories run. The illusion of order remains intact. But beneath it, something fundamental has shifted. Forced labor has revealed the true nature of Nazi intent. Not integration, not control, extraction and eradication. The people of the Krakow Ghetto are learning this lesson with their bodies. Each bruise, each collapse, each empty place at the table reinforces the truth. They are not workers in a system. They are fuel. And when fuel is exhausted, it is discarded. As the ghetto endures another dawn, another whistle, another march, a quiet understanding settles in. Labor has bought time, but time itself is running out. The next phase will not ask what Jews can produce. It will ask where they are to be sent when production no longer matters. Chapter 8. Violence, Terror, and Arbitrary Murder. It begins without warning, which is the point. A single shot cracks the air in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, echoing off brick walls and freezing everyone in place. No announcement follows. No explanation is offered. People wait, holding their breath, counting heartbeats, trying to determine whether the sound was meant as punishment, instruction, or entertainment. In the Krakow Ghetto, violence does not arrive as escalation. It arrives as punctuation, inserted wherever the occupiers choose, to remind everyone exactly who holds power over life and death. German patrols move through the ghetto with deliberate unpredictability. Some days they pass without incident, boots clicking rhythmically, faces unreadable. Other days they stop suddenly, seize a man at random, beat him until he collapses, then walk away as if nothing has happened. The absence of logic is not accidental. It teaches a crucial lesson. Obedience does not guarantee safety. Innocence does not matter. Survival is not earned. It is granted temporarily, and it can be revoked at any moment. Public executions become a tool of instruction. People are dragged into streets and courtyards, forced to watch neighbors die for offenses that are never fully explained. Sometimes the reason is whispered afterward. Smuggling, curfew violations, disrespect. Sometimes there is no reason at all. A guard was bored. A quota had to be met. Fear needed reinforcement. The body is left on display for hours, a warning written in flesh. Children learn to recognize the signs before adults do. The sudden stillness. The way conversations stop mid-sentence. The way birds scatter when shouting begins. They know when to run, when to hide, when to press themselves flat against walls and become invisible. Childhood instincts are replaced by survival instincts, sharpened by repetition and terror. Nighttime brings no relief. Darkness does not hide violence. It invites it. Raids erupt after curfew, boots pounding stairwells, rifle butts smashing doors. Apartments are torn apart in minutes. Mattresses slashed. Floors pried open. People dragged into hallways in their nightclothes, blinking against flashlight beams, hands raised instinctively. Sometimes the patrol leaves empty-handed. Sometimes they take someone away. Sometimes they kill on the spot. The randomness is the message. The ghetto absorbs these shocks quietly. There are no protests, no crowds. Fear has learned how to silence grief. After a killing, people clean the street. Blood is scrubbed away with water that could have been used for drinking. Life resumes, altered but continuing, because stopping would mean collapse. The ability to carry on becomes both a strength and a wound. German officers vary in cruelty, but the effect is the same. Some are openly sadistic, smiling as they strike, savoring the power. Others are detached, bureaucratic, carrying out violence as a task to be completed efficiently. This variety only deepens the terror. One cannot predict who will be merciful and who will not. One cannot prepare for moods. The Jewish police are forced into impossible positions during these moments. Ordered to assist, to cordon streets, to deliver people to German authorities, they become unwilling participants in terror. Some warn residents quietly before raids. Others are watched too closely to help. Their presence during violence fractures trust further, even as many of them are themselves beaten, humiliated, or killed by the same Germans they serve under coercion. The Judenrat receives reports of killings after the fact, stripped of context, stripped of agency. Council members document deaths, issue death certificates when allowed, try to comfort families they cannot protect. Each murder adds weight to an already unbearable burden. Their offices become places of quiet collapse, where strong men weep behind closed doors before stepping back into public roles that demand composure. Hunger intensifies the violence. Starvation makes people slower, weaker, less able to react quickly to commands. Guards notice. They exploit it. A delayed response becomes an excuse for beating. A stumble becomes defiance. A cough becomes suspicion. The body itself betrays the person inside it, turning vulnerability into a crime. Women face particular terror. Street harassment escalates into assault, often in full view of others who are powerless to intervene. Sexual violence is rarely spoken of openly, but it permeates the ghetto like a poison. Victims carry the trauma silently, knowing that reporting it would bring no justice, only further danger. Shame is imposed deliberately, another layer of control. Children witness things no child should see. Bodies in stairwells. Blood on snow. Parents dragged away. Their questions go unanswered, not because parents do not care, but because there are no words that can make sense of what is happening. Silence becomes a form of protection, even as it leaves wounds that will never heal. The Germans refine their use of terror carefully. They learn when to strike to achieve maximum psychological impact. After holidays, after rumors of resistance, after periods of relative calm, violence is used to reset the balance, to remind the ghetto that any sense of stability is an illusion. Calm is dangerous. It invites punishment. Rumors of mass shootings elsewhere seep into the ghetto, carried by workers and smugglers. Stories of pits, forests, entire communities wiped out in days. Some dismiss them as exaggerations born of fear. Others believe them fully and feel the future closing in. The killings inside the ghetto begin to feel like previews rather than isolated acts. German propaganda frames these murders as discipline, as law enforcement, as necessary measures against criminals and parasites. This language seeps into the environment, distorting reality. People begin to describe deaths in bureaucratic terms, not because they believe them, but because the language has been imposed so thoroughly that it becomes difficult to speak otherwise. Dehumanization advances not only through violence, but through vocabulary. The emotional toll is crushing. Depression spreads. Some stop leaving their rooms. Others throw themselves into work or smuggling, driven by the need to feel useful, alive. Suicide becomes an unspoken presence, a last attempt to control in a world that has stripped control away. Rabbis, doctors, friends do what they can, offering words, presence, distraction. Often it is not enough. And yet, amid the terror, there are moments of extraordinary courage. People shield one another during raids. Parents push children into hiding places and stand in doorways to draw attention to themselves. Neighbors pull the wounded inside and tend to them in secret. These acts do not stop the violence, but they defy its intent. They assert that even in a system built on cruelty, solidarity can still exist. The Germans respond to any hint of defiance with disproportionate force. Collective punishment becomes common. Entire buildings lose rations. Groups are beaten for the actions of one. This tactic deepens isolation, turning neighbors against one another, encouraging self-policing born of fear. The ghetto becomes a place where trust is dangerous, but mistrust is deadly. As killings continue, death becomes strangely familiar. People begin to speak of it in practical terms. Who will take care of the children if someone does not return? Where belongings will go? Which hiding place might work next time? This adaptation is not acceptance. It is survival under conditions designed to break the human spirit. German guards begin shooting from balconies, from windows, from elevated positions, turning the ghetto into a shooting gallery. Victims fall without warning, struck while walking, carrying water, standing in line. There is no pattern. That is the pattern. Life is made fragile, arbitrary, dependent entirely on the whims of armed men. The constant presence of death reshapes time. The future becomes unimaginable. The past feels distant, unreal. Only the present matters, measured in minutes and decisions. People learn to live inside narrow windows of attention, because thinking beyond them is unbearable. By now, the ghetto understands that violence is not a response to behavior. It is a policy. It is not meant to correct actions, but to prepare minds, to exhaust resistance, to normalize killing so thoroughly that when larger actions come, they will not provoke chaos, only shock followed by compliance. This understanding spreads quietly, without formal discussion. It settles into conversations, into glances, into the way people flinch at sudden sounds. The killings inside the ghetto are no longer seen as isolated tragedies. They're seen as signals. Something worse is coming. As night falls again, the ghetto grows tense, alert, braced. Candles flicker behind darkened windows. Families sit close, listening for footsteps, rehearsing plans they hope they will never need to use. Somewhere beyond the walls, German officials review reports, adjust strategies, prepare the next phase. The violence has done its work. Fear has been embedded. Resistance has been weakened. Life has been cheapened. The ghetto has been conditioned to accept death as part of daily existence. And soon, Death will no longer arrive one shot at a time. Chapter 9. The Children of the Ghetto. They are the first to wake and the last to sleep, because hunger does not respect age. In the Krakow Ghetto, childhood is measured not in years but in losses. Small bodies stir on shared floors, ribs pressing through skin, eyes opening already alert, already calculating. The day has not begun gently for them in a long time. There are no alarms, no school bells, no predictable routines. There is only the quiet question that greets every morning. Will I survive today? Children are everywhere in the ghetto, and yet they are treated as if they should not exist at all. German policy has no place for them. They do not work efficiently. They consume food. They complicate control. From the very beginning, children are marked as expendable, their lives tolerated only so long as they can be hidden behind adults or made briefly useful. This knowledge is not spoken aloud, but it is understood instinctively by parents who watch guards' eyes linger too long on small faces. Their bodies tell the story first. Growth slows, then stops. Limbs thin. Faces sharpen. Hair dulls and falls out in clumps. Hunger sculpts them into something fragile and old. Their clothes hang loose, patched repeatedly until fabric loses its shape entirely. Shoes are shared between siblings, passed down until soles separate from leather. Bare feet grow tough and cracked, learning the texture of cold stone too well. The sounds of the ghetto imprint themselves early. The crack of gunfire, the thud of boots on stairs, shouting in a language that means danger. Children learn to distinguish between ordinary noise and the sounds that demand immediate disappearance. They stop asking questions not because they understand, but because questions feel unsafe. Silence becomes a skill, practiced carefully, like holding breath underwater. For many, school continues in fragments. Lessons take place in kitchens, cellars, abandoned rooms, wherever a few children can gather without being seen. Teachers speak softly, their voices tight with urgency. Reading and arithmetic are taught not just as knowledge, but as proof that the future has not been completely erased. Books are hidden under clothing, passed hand to hand like contraband. Each lesson carries risk, but parents insist, because ignorance feels like surrender. Education, however, is no longer preparation for a career or a place in society. It is preparation for survival. Children learn how to count ration cards, how to read signs of danger, how to remember names and addresses in case families are separated, how to lie convincingly, how to disappear. These lessons are not written in notebooks. They are learned through observation, repetition, and fear. Many children become smugglers. Their size makes them valuable. They slip through gaps in walls, crawl through sewers, dart across streets where adults will be shot on sight. Each trip is a negotiation with death. They carry bread, potatoes, flour pressed into pockets, sometimes nothing at all. Guards fire at shadows. Some children do not return. Others return shaking, eyes too wide, clutching food that smells like salvation. Parents live in constant tension, torn between terror and necessity. To send a child out is unthinkable. To keep a child in without food is impossible. Mothers wait near windows, listening for familiar footsteps, counting minutes like prayers. When a child returns, relief floods through the room, sharp and overwhelming. When one does not, grief is swallowed quickly, because grief cannot feed the living. Disease stalks children relentlessly. Typhus spreads easily among the young, whose immune systems are already weakened by starvation. Fevers burn through small bodies. Coughs tear chests. Doctors do what they can with almost nothing, making compresses from scraps, whispering reassurance they know may be false. Parents sit through nights holding hands that grow colder, begging silently for breath to continue just a little longer. Orphanhood becomes common. Parents are taken during raids, shot in the street, sent to labor and never return. Children are absorbed into other households when possible, hidden behind new names, new stories. Sometimes they are turned away because there is simply no room, no food, no ability to protect another life. These children learn to navigate the ghetto alone, forming packs, sharing scraps, sleeping wherever there is shelter. The emotional weight they carry is immense. They witness violence directly, often without context or explanation. A father beaten, a neighbor shot, a body lying in the street, while adults force themselves not to look. The shock registers, then settles into something quieter and more dangerous. Normalization. The extraordinary becomes expected. Death becomes background. Play does not disappear entirely, but it changes. Games are brief, improvised, sharp with laughter that bursts out too loudly before being stifled. Children invent worlds where walls do not exist, where food is abundant, where adults are not afraid. These moments are precious and fleeting. They end quickly when reality intrudes, when a shout cuts through imagination and returns everyone to vigilance. Parents struggle with a pain deeper than hunger. They watch their children age too fast, carry responsibilities no child should bear. They discipline harshly at times, not from cruelty, but from fear that one wrong move could mean death. Love becomes protective, urgent, sometimes desperate. Words of comfort feel inadequate, so parents offer presents instead, holding children close in silence, memorizing faces they fear they may soon lose. German policy grows increasingly hostile toward children as the ghetto settles into routine terror. During raids, children are often targeted first. They are dragged from hiding places, shot for crying, beaten for running. Guards mock parents' pleas, using children to assert dominance. The message is unmistakable. There will be no future generations. Rumors circulate of places where children are taken away, separated, never seen again. Some believe these stories. Others cannot. The scale of such cruelty feels impossible to accept. Parents cling to denial because belief would break them entirely. Yet behavior changes. Children are hidden more aggressively. False walls are built. Crawl spaces are prepared. Quiet is enforced with terrifying intensity. Some families attempt the unthinkable, smuggling children out of the ghetto to be hidden by non-Jewish families. These efforts require connections, money, trust, and luck. The risks are enormous. Those caught face immediate execution. Those who succeed live with unbearable separation, not knowing if they will ever see their children again, or if their children will survive in a world that is turned against them. Inside the ghetto, religious rituals adapt to children's suffering. Prayers are said specifically for them. Blessings whispered over heads that have grown too light. Rabbis struggle to answer questions about faith and justice that adults themselves cannot resolve. Some children cling to belief. Others reject it angrily. Both responses coexist, shifting day to day, moment to moment. The psychological scars deepen. Nightmares plague sleep. Children wake screaming, or stop sleeping altogether. Bedwetting returns. Speech falters. Some withdraw entirely, becoming quiet, watchful, detached. Others grow aggressive, quick to anger, mirroring the violence around them. There is no safe outlet for emotion. Everything must be contained. As deportations elsewhere intensify, fear sharpens around children. Parents understand what German ideology implies. They hear whispers from laborers, fragments of testimony from other ghettos. Children are not being relocated. They are being eliminated. This realization settles like ice in the chest. The ghetto itself begins to feel like a narrowing corridor leading toward an unavoidable reckoning. Despite this, there are moments of astonishing tenderness. A piece of bread saved for a child instead of eaten by an adult. A lullaby sung softly at night. A story told from memory, stretching time long enough for sleep to arrive. These gestures do not change fate, but they assert love where the system intends despair. Children sense the tension building even if they cannot name it. They watch adults whisper more often, argue more sharply, hide more desperately. They feel themselves being moved, repositioned, prepared. The ghetto teaches them that they are burdens in the eyes of power, yet treasures in the eyes of those who love them. This contradiction becomes a defining wound. As the months pass, children become symbols as well as victims. Their presence exposes the lie at the heart of Nazi policy. No labor justification can explain their suffering. No security argument can rationalize their murder. They exist as living evidence that the goal is not control, but eradication. The Germans understand this too. That is why children terrify the system. They represent continuity, memory, the possibility of survival beyond the present. And so they are targeted with increasing ruthlessness, not as individuals, but as a future to be extinguished. By the time the ghetto reaches the next stage of its existence, parents know what is coming, even if they cannot fully articulate it. They begin making impossible calculations. Who can hide? Who might pass as older? Who might be smuggled out? Who must be prepared for the worst? These decisions fracture hearts in ways that will never heal. As night falls, children curl into adults for warmth, fingers clutching clothing, seeking reassurance in touch rather than words. Candles flicker, shadows stretching across walls that feel too close. Outside, guards patrol, indifferent to the lies unfolding behind brick and wire. The children of the Krakow Ghetto are still alive, still breathing, still dreaming in fragments. But the space allowed for their existence is shrinking rapidly. Soon, the system that has tolerated them reluctantly will decide they are no longer worth the inconvenience. When that moment arrives, childhood itself will become a crime. Chapter 10. Deportations begin. The order does not arrive with fanfare. It slips into the ghetto on scraps of paper, through shouted commands, through the sudden tightening of patrols, and the unmistakable tension in the air. By the spring of 1942, the Krakow Ghetto has learned to read these signs. People sense when a line is about to be crossed. Conversations quiet. Icing streets more urgently. Fear, long familiar, sharpens into something colder. This is no longer about punishment or terror alone. This is about removal. The first action begins early in the morning, timed deliberately to catch people half awake, unprepared, disoriented. Loudspeakers crackle to life, barking orders that echo off walls shaped like gravestones. Jews are instructed to assemble at designated points, to bring documents, to bring belongings for resettlement. The word resettlement hangs in the air, heavy with false promise. Some cling to it desperately. Others feel a chill that words can no longer explain. Płaszów becomes the center of the storm. What was once a public square is transformed into a funnel of human lives. Families stream in from every direction, carrying bundles tied with string, suitcases stuffed with clothing, photographs, fragments of identity. Guards shout. Whips crack. The square fills with the sound of crying children, barking orders, boots scraping against stone. The smell of fear is unmistakable, sharp and sour, clinging to the air. German officers oversee the process with practiced detachment. Lists are checked. Lines are rearranged. People are pushed, pulled, separated. The logic of selection begins to reveal itself in fragments. Those deemed fit for labor are sometimes pulled aside. The elderly hesitate, confused, struggling to keep up. Children cling to parents, fingers white with panic. Any attempt to resist, to question, to slow the process is met with violence. The Jewish police are forced into the square, ordered to assist. Some avert their eyes. Others whisper warnings when they can. Many are powerless to intervene at all. The machinery is too large, too ruthless. The crowd presses inward, bodies packed tightly together, heat rising, air thinning. People faint and are trampled. Guards drag bodies aside, alive or dead. It makes little difference. The promise of resettlement collapses quickly under the weight of reality. Families are torn apart openly, brutally. A mother is shoved one way, her child another. A husband reaches for his wife and is struck down for the attempt. The square fills with screams that tear at the throat until voices give out. There is no order in the chaos, only force. From Płaszów, columns are driven toward the railway station. The march is slow and punishing. People stumble under the weight of their belongings. Guards strike anyone who falls behind. Onlookers watch from windows and sidewalks, frozen in place, uncertain whether to look away or bear witness. The distance is not far, but it feels endless. Each step is a step away from everything familiar. At the station, the truth becomes harder to ignore. Freight cars wait on the tracks, dark and stinking, doors thrown open like mouths. There are no seats, no windows, no provisions. Guards shout that this is temporary, that families will be reunited, that work awaits. Few believe it now. Panic surges as people realize what is being demanded. They are being loaded like cargo. People are shoved into the cars until there is no room to move, no space to sit. The doors are slammed shut from the outside, plunging the interior into darkness. Screams erupt, muffled by wood and metal. The air grows foul immediately. Those outside hear pounding, begging, prayer shouted through cracks that let in only slivers of light. The destination is Bełżec, though most do not yet know the name. They are told nothing, or they are lied to. Those who have heard rumors understand enough. Bełżec is not a labor camp. It is part of Operation Reinhard, a place built solely for killing. But this knowledge is fragmented, incomplete, almost impossible to grasp fully. The scale of the lie is too large. Inside the ghetto, the aftermath settles like ash. Streets are suddenly emptier. Apartments stand silent, doors hanging open, belongings scattered where people drop them in panic. Shoes lie abandoned. Toys roll in the dirt. The absence is louder than any gunshot. Those left behind move through the wreckage in a daze, afraid to speak too loudly, afraid to hope, afraid to mourn openly. The Germans are not finished. Deportations continue in waves, each action refining the process further. Guards grow more efficient. Resistance is crushed more swiftly. The selection criteria sharpen. Children and the elderly are targeted openly now. There is no longer any pretense of protection. The ghetto understands that labor permits may delay the inevitable, but they cannot stop it. People adapt desperately. Hiding places multiply. False walls, attic crawl spaces, cellars packed with bodies holding breath for hours. Parents drug children with scraps of medicine to keep them silent. Entire families cram into spaces meant for storage, pressing against one another, listening to footsteps pass inches away. Sometimes the patrols leave. Sometimes they do not. The Jewish Council receives orders to produce numbers for each transport. Quotas are set. Deadlines enforced. Council members argue, plead, stall where they can. It is never enough. The Germans respond with executions, arrests, threats against families. The impossible choices of earlier months now crystallize into something openly monstrous. Participation means facilitating death. Refusal means immediate death. The psychological toll is staggering. Survivors of each action live with crushing guilt. Why was I spared? Why not them? Why not my child? Sleep becomes a torment of replayed images, screams echoing in memory, faces lost in crowds. The ghetto is haunted while still alive. Children who remain grow quieter, more watchful. They understand now that being seen is dangerous. They shrink into corners, into shadows, into silence. Parents rehearse plans endlessly, knowing that no plan is sufficient. Love becomes desperate, expressed through constant proximity, as if closeness might protect against disappearance. German authorities observe the results with satisfaction. Deportations are proceeding efficiently. Resistance remains minimal. The population is being reduced at a manageable pace. The ghetto is fulfilling its function as a staging ground for annihilation. What was once experimental has become routine. Outside the ghetto, trains run on schedule. Paperwork is filed. Reports are written in neutral language that disguises murder as logistics. Numbers are tallied. Success is measured in empty apartments and full freight cars. The distance between decision and death is wide enough to preserve the illusion of order. Inside, the atmosphere changes irrevocably. Hope, once fragile but present, begins to fracture. People stop planning for months ahead. They plan for hours, for minutes, for the next knock on the door. Trust erodes further as fear turns inward. Survival becomes solitary. And yet, there are moments of courage that flicker stubbornly. People refuse to board trains and are shot where they stand. Parents hide children and face execution when discovered. Friends warn one another at great personal risk. These acts do not halt the deportations, but they expose the lie that victims went willingly. As summer approaches, the ghetto grows thinner, quieter, more desperate. Each transport removes thousands. Each absence deepens the knowledge that the destination is death. Bełżec becomes a whispered word, heavy with dread. No letters return. No survivors come back. The Krakow Ghetto is no longer a place of waiting. It is a place of departure. The walls that once confined now funnel people outward toward an end they can barely comprehend. The system has moved beyond terror and exploitation. It has entered its final phase. Those who remain understand now, with painful clarity, that the ghetto was never meant to be permanent. It was a way station, a holding pen, a preparation ground. The trains have begun to roll, and they will not stop until the square is empty. The shadow of the camps has arrived, and it is pulling the ghetto into its orbit, one transport at a time. Chapter 11: Resistance, Defiance, and Desperation. The first act of resistance in the Krakow Ghetto is not loud. It does not announce itself with gunfire or banners. It appears quietly, in the refusal to break completely, in the decision to hide a child rather than hand them over, in the whispered warning passed from one apartment to another when patrols are coming. By the time deportations begin, resistance is no longer a question of ideology. It is a question of dignity, of choosing how one will face what is coming when escape is no longer possible. After the first action, something shifts in the air. The illusion that obedience might save lives collapses. People have seen families disappear after following orders precisely. They have watched laborers dragged from workshops despite permits. They have heard the rumors, too consistent now to dismiss, of places where trains go in full and never return. The ghetto understands that compliance has failed. From this realization, resistance is born. It begins with information. News is smuggled in from outside, carried by workers and couriers who risk death for every word they pass along. Names of camps circulate. Bełżec, Auschwitz, places spoken softly, heavy with meaning. People trade fragments of testimony, piecing together a picture that is almost too horrifying to accept. Knowledge itself becomes a weapon, stripping away Nazi lies and replacing them with grim clarity. Young people are often the first to act on this knowledge. They have less to lose, or they believe they do. Many are already orphaned, already marked. Youth groups that once debated politics or culture now turn their energy toward survival and defiance. They meet in basements, attics, abandoned rooms, speaking in code, planning quietly. These gatherings are dangerous. Discovery means execution. Still, they continue. Weapons are scarce, nearly non-existent. A pistol smuggled in at enormous cost. A few grenades stolen from construction sites. Knives, clubs, improvised explosives. None of it is enough to fight an army. Everyone understands this. The goal is not victory. It is refusal. If death is inevitable, then submission is optional. Acts of sabotage multiply. Machinery is damaged. Production slowed. Goods intentionally ruined in subtle ways that delay detection. These acts are small, but they carry enormous risk. Punishments are collective and brutal. Entire buildings lose rations. Random executions follow. Yet sabotage continues, fueled by the understanding that productivity only feeds the machine that will eventually kill them. Hiding becomes a form of resistance as well. Elaborate bunkers are constructed beneath floors, behind walls, inside furniture. Families memorize escape routes within their own apartments. Children are trained to remain silent for hours, sometimes days. Breathing becomes controlled. Movement becomes measured. Survival depends on discipline and luck. The Germans respond with intensified searches. Raids grow more thorough, more violent. Walls are tapped. Floors are pried open. Dogs sniff out hiding places. When bunkers are discovered, the consequences are immediate and lethal. Still, people continue to hide. The alternative feels worse. The Jewish police face growing hostility from both sides. Some abandon their posts and join resistance networks. Others continue under duress, trying to balance survival with conscience. The Germans tighten control, aware that internal enforcement is weakening. Trust inside the ghetto erodes further, but it is now mixed with a shared understanding. The system is closing in. Choices are narrowing. Spiritual resistance deepens alongside physical defiance. Religious observance becomes more deliberate, more urgent. Prayers are said not for deliverance, but for strength, for courage, for the ability to face death without surrendering identity. Rabbis speak of sanctifying life through defiance, of maintaining humanity in a world designed to erase it. Art becomes sharper, more overtly political. Poems circulate that speak openly of murder and betrayal. Songs mourn the dead and mock the occupiers. These creations are dangerous. Possession alone can mean death. Yet people continue to write, to sing, to remember. Memory itself becomes an act of rebellion against a regime determined to leave no witnesses. Some resistance efforts reach beyond the ghetto. Contacts are made with Polish underground groups, though help is limited and often unreliable. Anti-Semitism persists outside the walls, complicating alliances. Still, weapons are smuggled when possible. Information flows in both directions. The ghetto is no longer isolated entirely. It is connected, tenuously, to a larger struggle. The decision to fight is never unanimous. Families argue bitterly. Parents beg children not to take risks that will lead to certain death. Young people accuse elders of clinging to false hope. These conflicts are painful, intimate, and unresolved. There is no correct path. Every choice carries its own form of loss. As deportations continue, resistance becomes more desperate. Plans are made to attack during the next action, to disrupt transports, to create chaos long enough for some to escape. The odds are terrible. The Germans are heavily armed. Reinforcements are nearby. The ghetto is sealed. Yet the plans proceed, driven by the belief that dying while fighting preserves something essential. When clashes occur, they are brief and violent. Shots ring out. Grenades explode. Panic spreads. German forces respond with overwhelming firepower. Fighters are killed quickly, often publicly, their bodies left as warnings. The uprising does not stop the deportations, but it changes something fundamental. It exposes the lie that Jews went passively to their deaths. For those who witness these moments, the impact is profound. Fear is joined by pride, despair by meaning. Even those who did not fight feel the tremor of defiance ripple through the ghetto. The knowledge that someone resisted, that someone said no, becomes a source of grim strength. The Germans react with fury. Collective punishments intensify. Entire families are executed for suspected involvement. The ghetto is placed under tighter surveillance. Remaining leaders are arrested or killed. The cost of resistance is staggering, and everyone knows it. Still, resistance does not disappear. It adapts. Desperation drives people to consider escape. Some attempt to flee the ghetto using forged papers, disguises, connections outside. Success is rare. Capture is common. Execution is immediate. Yet attempts continue, fueled by the instinct to move, to act, to reject immobility. Inside the ghetto, conversations change tone. People speak openly about death now, not as rumor but as destination. They discuss how they want to face it, together or alone, fighting or hiding, praying or cursing. These discussions are heavy, intimate, and strangely clarifying. When the future disappears, values sharpen. Children absorb this shift quietly. They sense the urgency, the readiness in adults' voices. Some are trained to run messages, to recognize signals, to assist in ways that frighten their parents but feel necessary. Childhood slips further away, replaced by purpose forged in terror. By now, the Germans understand that resistance exists, but they also understand its limits. The ghetto is too small, too isolated, too weakened to sustain prolonged revolt. They prepare accordingly. Forces are positioned. Plans are drawn. The goal is no longer management. It is liquidation. Those inside the ghetto feel this approaching finality. The atmosphere grows taut, electric, heavy with anticipation. People cling to one another, argue, reconcile, forgive. There's a sense of standing at the edge of something vast and irreversible. Resistance has not saved the ghetto. It was never likely to, but it has transformed the meaning of what happens next. When the final phase arrives, it will not find a population unaware or compliant. It will find people who understand exactly what is being done to them, and who, in whatever ways they can manage, have chosen to answer with defiance rather than silence. The next blow will be decisive, and when it falls, the Krakow Ghetto will not disappear quietly. Chapter 12. The Ghetto Divided. The announcement arrives like a blade pressed gently at first, then harder, until everyone understands it is not a suggestion. The Krakow Ghetto is to be reorganized, not expanded, not improved, divided. New boundaries are drawn inside the walls that already cage thousands of lives. Streets are reassigned. Buildings are reclassified. People are ordered to move again, this time not across a river, but across an invisible line that will determine who may live a little longer and who will almost certainly die. German officials explain the change with cold efficiency. The ghetto will be split into two sections, one for those capable of work, one for those who are not. The language is technical, almost polite. It avoids the words children, elderly, sick. But everyone understands immediately what those categories mean. This is no longer indirect selection. It is explicit. Ghetto A is designated for laborers, those with work permits, those whose bodies can still produce value. Ghetto B is for everyone else, the young, the old, the weak, the people whose usefulness, in German eyes, has expired. Families are given days, sometimes hours, to relocate accordingly. Panic spreads faster than any order. This is not relocation. This is sorting. Apartments are stripped and repacked once more. The sound of movement fills the ghetto again, carts scraping, furniture dragged, footsteps echoing with urgency. But this time, there is something different in the air. Desperation is sharper. Arguments erupt openly. Families fracture under the weight of impossible choices. Who goes where? Who belongs with whom? Who might be saved by separation? And who will be condemned by it? Parents face decisions that will haunt humanity forever. A child is too young to work, but perhaps could be hidden in Ghetto A. An elderly parent is slowing everyone down, but abandoning them feels like murder. A sick spouse cannot survive relocation, but staying together means entering Ghetto B as a family. These are not theoretical dilemmas. They are lived in cramped rooms, under threat, with guards waiting outside. People attempt to cheat the system in any way they can. Ages are altered on documents. Children are coached to appear older, stronger. The sick bind their chests, force themselves upright, swallow pain to pass inspections. Doctors falsify records when possible. Council members delay lists, rewrite names, shift people between categories at great personal risk. Every small act of deception feels like a stolen breath. German inspections accompany the division relentlessly. Officials walk through buildings, eyes sharp, judgments instantaneous. A limp, a cough, a stooped posture. These details become death sentences. People are pulled from lines without explanation. Pleas are ignored. Families reach for one another and are torn apart by force. The sound of crying grows constant, raw, animal, echoing through stairwells and courtyards. The Jewish police are ordered to enforce the separation. Some comply numbly. Others break down openly. They are instructed to move people into the correct sections, to prevent unauthorized crossings, to report violations. This role, more than any other, shatters what remains of trust. Neighbors who once shared bread now fear one another. Every knock on the door feels like betrayal waiting to happen. Ghetto B fills quickly. Its streets are quieter, heavier, weighed down by bodies that have been judged unnecessary. Children cling to parents, sensing the shift even if they cannot fully grasp it. The elderly sit on beds or crates, conserving strength they know they will need but may never use. The sick lie in corners, feverish, ignored by a system that has already written them off. Food distribution in Ghetto B becomes even more scarce. Rations are reduced further, starvation accelerating what deportations will soon complete. Doctors and nurses continue to work, though they understand the futility. Medicine is almost non-existent. Comfort becomes the primary service offered. Holding hands, whispering reassurance, witnessing suffering so that it is not entirely erased. Ghetto A, by contrast, grows more tightly controlled. Workers are monitored constantly. Attendance is strict. Absence is punished. The message is clear. Survival here is conditional and temporary. Labor does not grant safety. It only delays selection. People feel this truth pressing down on them daily, shaping every interaction. Families separated by the division attempt to maintain contact. Messages are smuggled. Food is passed through fences. Children are hidden temporarily during inspections. These efforts are dangerous and often punished severely. Guards watch crossings closely. Anyone caught violating the separation risks immediate execution. Still, people try. Love does not obey zoning laws. At night, the ghetto feels different on either side of the division. In Ghetto A, exhaustion dominates. Bodies collapse into sleep after forced labor, minds racing with fear of the next inspection. In Ghetto B, nights are filled with coughing, crying, whispered prayers. Parents tell stories to distract children from hunger. The elderly speak softly about the past, about Krakow before the walls, as if anchoring memory might offer protection. The psychological impact of the division is devastating. People internalize the categories imposed on them. Those in Ghetto A feel guilty for surviving, ashamed of relief. Those in Ghetto B feel discarded, invisible, burdensome. The Nazis have succeeded in turning human worth into a measurable commodity, and the ghetto absorbs this logic painfully. Rumors spread rapidly. Ghetto B is temporary. Ghetto B is a holding area. Ghetto B is being prepared for transport. These whispers are not new, but the division gives them terrifying clarity. People understand now that deportations will no longer be random or disguised. They will be systematic, targeted, efficient. Children in Ghetto B sense the danger acutely. They are watched more closely. Raids increase. Hiding becomes constant. Parents prepare emergency plans that change daily as conditions shift. Some attempt to smuggle children back into Ghetto A, bribing officials, forging documents, risking everything for a chance that may not last more than days. The Germans monitor the results with satisfaction. The division has streamlined control. It has concentrated those to be deported. It has reduced resistance by fragmenting families and breaking solidarity. What once required force now happens through compliance driven by terror and exhaustion. The Jewish Council, what remains of it, understands the significance immediately. This is the prelude to liquidation. Lists will be easier to compile now. Selections faster. Trains fuller. Council members argue late into the night, searching for ways to delay, disrupt, confuse the process. Their power is almost gone, but they cling to it fiercely, because any delay may mean another sunrise for someone. Acts of resistance increase quietly in response. More hiding places are built. Weapons are moved. Escape plans are discussed more openly. The division has stripped away remaining illusions. There is no longer a debate about intentions. The ghetto has been categorized for death. The non-Jewish world outside the walls continues largely unchanged. Trams run. Shops open. The city breathes normally, even as its Jewish population is dissected within meters of ordinary life. This proximity deepens the sense of abandonment. The ghetto is not hidden in a forest. It is in the heart of Krakow, visible, audible, ignored. As days pass, the division becomes entrenched. People settle into new routines, not because they accept them, but because adaptation is the only way to survive even briefly. But beneath the surface, tension builds relentlessly. Everyone feels it. The ghetto is holding its breath. Parents in Ghetto B watch their children with unbearable intensity, memorizing faces, voices, habits, as if preparing for imminent loss. Workers in Ghetto A fear every inspection, every cough, every sign of weakness that might send them across the line. No one feels safe. Safety has been abolished as a concept. The division of the ghetto is not just administrative. It is psychological warfare. It forces people to confront the hierarchy of survival directly, to see where they stand in the eyes of their executioners. It prepares the population for what comes next by making the next step feel inevitable. By the time the walls inside the walls are complete, the Krakow Ghetto is no longer a single community. It is a system of staged disappearance. One side still working, the other waiting, both knowing the outcome. The Germans have simplified their task. The machinery of deportation is nearly ready to operate at full capacity. The ghetto has been reduced to components, sorted and labeled. All that remains is to empty it. Chapter 13. Amon Goth and the Shadow of Płaszów. The ghetto senses him before it ever sees him. Fear changes texture, becoming sharper, more deliberate, as though it has learned a new name. Orders grow harsher. Violence becomes more public, more theatrical. The Germans are preparing something nearby, something permanent, something meant to absorb what remains of Jewish life in Krakow. The place already has a name, whispered with dread. Płaszów. And at its center stands a man who will come to embody the logic of terror itself. Construction begins on the grounds of a former quarry, just beyond the ghetto's walls. From within Krakow, the sound of hammering carries faintly across the city, a steady rhythm that feels ominous in its persistence. Jewish laborers are forced to build it themselves. Barracks rise from churned earth. Fences stretch outward. Watchtowers take shape against the sky. Each plank nailed into place feels like a countdown. People know, instinctively, that this camp is not being built for German convenience. It is being built for them. Amon Goth arrives as commandant with a reputation that precedes him. He is young, ambitious, and utterly unrestrained by conscience. Where earlier officials hid cruelty behind bureaucracy, Goth embraces it openly. He rules through spectacle, through randomness, through fear sharpened into daily ritual. His authority is absolute, and he exercises it with enthusiasm. From the windows of his villa overlooking the camp, Goth turns murder into routine. He shoots prisoners for walking too slowly, for pausing, for existing within his line of sight. The crack of rifle fire becomes part of the morning soundscape. Workers glance upward reflexively, knowing that at any moment, death may arrive from above. Goth treats these killings as sport, as discipline, as proof of power. He rarely explains himself. He does not need to. The shadow of Płaszów stretches quickly into the Krakow Ghetto. Deportations increasingly bypass Bełżec and move instead toward this new destination. Those taken do not vanish immediately. They are seen again, briefly, marching in columns, thinner, beaten, already marked by what awaits them. Their appearance alone communicates what words cannot. Płaszów is not a labor camp in the ordinary sense. It is a place where cruelty is unregulated, where survival depends entirely on whim. The Germans begin transferring entire sections of the ghetto into Płaszów. Families are given moments to gather belongings before being driven out under guard. The journey is short, but it feels like crossing into another reality. As prisoners pass through the gates, they are stripped of names, reduced to numbers, absorbed into a system that no longer pretends to manage life. It only decides when to end it. Inside the ghetto, those who remain feel the shift immediately. Płaszów is closer than Bełżec ever was. Its presence is constant, visible, audible. Gunshots carry on the wind. Smoke rises. The illusion that death happens elsewhere collapses. The machinery is now next door. Goth's brutality reshapes behavior, even beyond the camp. Guards mimic his cruelty, emboldened by his example. Killings inside the ghetto increase in frequency and boldness. German authority grows more personal, less procedural. Terror no longer needs justification. Goth has shown that murder itself is sufficient. The Jewish police and remaining council members understand what this means. Płaszów represents the end of the ghetto as a semi-autonomous space. Control is shifting fully into SS hands. The transition from containment to liquidation is underway. The ghetto is no longer a place to be managed. It is a reservoir to be emptied into the camp. Labor assignments change accordingly. Workers are redirected to Płaszów projects, their exhaustion exploited to expand the very camp that will imprison them. Those who falter are beaten or shot on the spot. There is no medical care worth naming. Injuries become death sentences. Survival depends on constant motion, constant submission. Goth cultivates fear deliberately. He orders executions in front of assembled prisoners, forcing them to watch, to understand the consequences of any perceived defiance. He uses his dogs as weapons, setting them on prisoners for amusement. His presence transforms violence into performance, designed to break not just bodies but wills. Yet even here, something resists erasure. Prisoners memorize Goth's routines, learning when to avoid certain paths, when to keep eyes down, when to move quickly. Survival becomes hyper-alertness, an exhausting vigilance that consumes every waking moment. Some find ways to sabotage quietly, to steal scraps, to help one another despite the risk. These acts are fragile and fleeting, but they persist. For the ghetto, Płaszów becomes the future made visible. Parents look at their children and imagine them under Goth's gaze. The thought is unbearable. Desperation deepens. Hiding intensifies. Escape attempts increase, even as the odds worsen. People know now that waiting leads only to the camp. Amon Goth himself becomes a mythic figure within the ghetto, a symbol of unrestrained power. Stories circulate of his cruelty, each one reinforcing the sense that mercy has vanished from the system entirely. Whether every story is accurate matters less than the truth they convey. The rules have changed. Life is cheaper than ever. German officials view Goth as effective. He produces results. The camp expands rapidly. Transfers accelerate. The process is efficient, brutal, and highly visible. The ghetto is being dismantled not in secrecy, but in full view of those who remain, as a warning and a lesson. Some prisoners from Płaszów are occasionally reassigned back to Krakow for labor. They return altered, hollow-eyed, marked by violence. Their presence terrifies those who see them. They speak quietly, cautiously, describing a place where death is casual and suffering constant. Their testimony erases any remaining doubt about what awaits. Oskar Schindler's factory gains new significance during this period. Workers there are transferred to Płaszów, but continue working under Schindler's protection. Compared to Goth's camp, Schindler's operation feels almost unreal in its relative safety. This contrast sharpens the cruelty of the broader system. Survival becomes a matter of proximity to rare individuals willing to intervene. Goth despises Schindler's influence, but tolerates it because it serves economic goals. This uneasy coexistence underscores the arbitrary nature of power. Lives hinge on personal relationships, bribes, moods. There is no justice, only leverage. Inside the ghetto, the remaining population dwindles rapidly. Buildings stand half empty. Streets echo. The absence of neighbors becomes a constant reminder of what has already been lost. Those left behind feel like ghosts waiting to be claimed. The psychological pressure becomes overwhelming. People live with the sound of gunfire from Płaszów as a backdrop to daily life. Each shot feels personal, as though it is aimed not just at the camp, but at the ghetto itself. Fear tightens its grip, squeezing out remaining illusions. The Germans are nearly finished with this phase. The ghetto has served its purpose. It has isolated, weakened, and prepared its inhabitants. Płaszów now stands ready to absorb what remains. The transition is no longer subtle. It is happening openly, relentlessly. As Amon Goth consolidates his control, the Krakow ghetto slips further into irrelevance in Nazi planning. Its walls still stand, but they no longer contain a community. They contain remnants, fragments waiting to be transferred or destroyed. Those who remain understand this with terrible clarity. The shadow of Płaszów has fallen completely over the ghetto. The next step will not be gradual. It will be final. The man in the villa has made that much certain. Chapter 14. The liquidation of the Krakow Ghetto. The final days begin not with chaos, but with a stillness so heavy it feels unnatural. By March of 1943, the Krakow Ghetto has been stripped down to its core. The streets are thinner, quieter, haunted by absence. Those who remain know, with a certainty that no longer requires proof, that the end is near. There are no more illusions to cling to, no rumors left to debate. The question is no longer what will happen, but how it will happen, and whether anyone will survive it. German forces move into position methodically. SS units, police battalions, auxiliaries. The machinery is assembled with practiced precision. Orders are finalized. Lists prepared. Routes mapped. This is not an improvised action. It is the conclusion of a process years in the making. The ghetto is no longer being managed or reduced. It is being erased. At dawn, the sound of boots fills the streets. Louder than before. More numerous. Louder even than gunfire. The walls that once contained fear now trap it completely. Loudspeakers issue commands that echo off bricks shaped like gravestones, telling residents to assemble, to remain inside, to comply. Some obey. Many do not. Too much has already been learned. SS men move from building to building, tearing through doors, dragging people from hiding places that had worked before, but no longer do. Attics are pried open. Floors smashed. Walls broken apart. Dogs sniff relentlessly. The ghetto becomes a battlefield, not between armies, but between terror and desperation. Families scatter in all directions. Parents shove children into hiding places they know are imperfect but hope will last long enough. People run through stairwells, leap between rooftops, squeeze into crawl spaces barely large enough to breathe. Silence becomes a weapon and a curse. Children are forced to cover their mouths to keep from crying. Adults hold breath until lungs burn. In the streets, those caught are shot without hesitation. Bodies fall where they stand. There is no attempt to maintain order, no pretense of relocation. The Germans are no longer interested in procedure. Efficiency now means speed. Gunfire cracks constantly, echoing through the ghetto in waves. Blood pools on stone. Snow and dust turn dark beneath boots. Children are hunted deliberately. SS men pull them from hiding, shoot them in courtyards, against walls and stairwells. Mothers throw themselves over their children and are killed where they kneel. Infants are torn from arms and smashed against walls. These are not acts of rage. They are acts of policy, carried out systematically, without pause. The streets fill with screaming, then fall eerily quiet as voices are extinguished. Smoke rises from burning buildings where Germans set fires to flush out those in hiding. Flames lick at windows. Thick black smoke fills narrow streets, choking those still alive. People are forced out coughing, eyes burning, only to be shot moments later. Some attempt armed resistance. Shots are fired from windows. A grenade explodes, briefly disrupting the advance. The response is immediate and overwhelming. Entire buildings are surrounded and destroyed. Resistance fighters are killed within minutes. Their defiance does not stop the liquidation, but it punctures the myth of passivity one last time. Płaszów becomes a killing ground. Those captured alive are driven there, forced to kneel, beaten, sorted in moments that feel both endless and instantaneous. A handful deemed fit for labor are separated for transport to Płaszów. The rest, especially children and the elderly, are executed nearby or loaded on trucks bound for death. The Jewish police are destroyed along with everyone else. Those who once enforced orders are now hunted, beaten, shot, discarded. The system no longer needs intermediaries. The final act requires only force. The Judenrat does not survive this day. Its remaining members are killed or deported. There are no more lists to compile, no more quotas to meet. The burden of impossible choices ends only because choice itself is eliminated. Inside apartments, people wait in hiding, listening to the sounds of murder inch closer. Footsteps above. Voices in German. The scrape of metal against wood. Some hiding places hold. Others do not. When discovered, there is no negotiation. Gunfire answers everything. Those captured alive are marched out under guard, past bodies still lying where they fell. Survivors avert their eyes or stare in shock, unable to process the scale of destruction unfolding around them. The march toward Płaszów is short, but it feels like crossing a boundary between existence and erasure. The ghetto behind them burns and collapses into itself. Throughout the liquidation, Amon Goth oversees operations with casual authority. His presence looms even when he is not physically there. His methods have shaped this moment. The speed, the brutality, the absence of restraint. This is the world he represents, brought fully into the open. By nightfall, the Krakow Ghetto is effectively dead. Gunfire fades. Smoke hangs low. Fires smolder. Streets are littered with bodies, belongings, fragments of lives interrupted mid-motion. The silence that follows is not peace. It is the silence of extermination completed. German units conduct final sweeps, ensuring no one remains alive. Those found are executed on the spot. The walls that once confined thousands now enclose almost nothing. The ghetto has been transformed from a place of suffering into a place of absence. In the days that follow, the destruction is finalized. Buildings are looted, then demolished. The area is cleared to erase evidence of what occurred. The Nazis do not want a memorial. They want forgetting. They want the ground itself to deny that Jewish life ever existed there. Survivors from the liquidation are absorbed into Płaszów, where terror continues under Gotha's rule. Others are sent onward to Auschwitz, where death is mechanized and impersonal, far from the streets where this community once lived. The Krakow Ghetto does not empty into freedom. It empties into the camps. The city beyond the ghetto resumes its routines quickly. Trams run. Shops reopen. People step around ruins without comment. The proximity of genocide does not disrupt daily life for long. This, too, is part of the horror. The world proves capable of absorbing mass murder without stopping. What remains of the Krakow Ghetto is rubble and memory. A place that once held 60,000 lives is reduced to silence in a matter of days. Generations of history vanish almost overnight. The speed is staggering. The efficiency terrifying. For those who live through it, the liquidation is not experienced as a single event, but as a series of moments that never stop replaying. The last look exchanged. The sound of a child's voice cut short. The feeling of hands slipping away. These memories do not end when the gunfire stops. They follow survivors into camps, into liberation, into old age. The liquidation marks the final transformation of the ghetto from a site of oppression into a site of annihilation. What began as segregation ended as massacre. The walls that once symbolized confinement now stand as mute witnesses to murder. The Krakow Ghetto is gone. But what happened there does not end with its destruction. The survivors carry it forward. The camps absorb it. The history of the Holocaust cannot be understood without this place, without these streets, without the knowledge that before gas chambers and crematoria, there were neighborhoods turned into killing fields. The liquidation is not an isolated crime. It is a link in a chain, a necessary step in a system that learned, refined, and perfected the art of mass murder. The ghetto was the rehearsal. This was a final act. And even in its destruction, the Krakow Ghetto leaves behind a question that refuses to disappear. How could this happen in full view of the world, in the heart of a living city, and be allowed to end in silence? Chapter 15. Aftermath, Memory, and the Road Beyond the Ghetto. When the gunfire finally fades, Krakow does not erupt in relief. It exhales cautiously, as if unsure whether it is allowed to breathe again. The streets where the ghetto once stood are silent, unnaturally so, emptied not by evacuation, but by erasure. Ash settles into cracks between stones. Smoke lingers in the air for days, carrying the smell of burned wood, burned belongings, burned lives. The Krakow Ghetto is gone, but its absence feels heavier than its presence ever did. German authorities move quickly to finish the work of disappearance. Buildings are stripped, looted, dismantled. Anything of value is seized. Anything that might remind the city of what existed there is destroyed. The physical traces of Jewish life are treated as inconveniences, obstacles to be cleared. The goal is not merely removal of people, but removal of memory. A city cleansed not only of Jews, but of the evidence that they ever lived there. Survivors of the liquidation are absorbed into the machinery that will define the remainder of the Holocaust. Some are marched into Płaszów, where Amon Gotha's reign of terror continues unchecked. Others are loaded onto trains bound for Auschwitz, where murder no longer requires improvisation or witnesses. There, death is industrial, impersonal, efficient. For those who pass through the ghetto only to end up in the camps, Krakow becomes a chapter that feels almost unreal in retrospect, a place where life was still recognizable before it was reduced to numbers and smoke. In Płaszów, the former ghetto residents are stripped of the last illusions they may still carry. The camp confirms what the ghetto foreshadowed. That brutality is the point. That survival depends entirely on chance, whim, and exploitation. Many who endured the ghetto do not survive the camp. Hunger, beatings, executions, disease. The path from the ghetto to the camps is not a continuation of suffering. It is an acceleration. Auschwitz awaits others, its scale dwarfing even the horrors of Krakow. Families separated for the last time on arrival ramps. Children sent one direction, adults another. Smoke rising constantly. For those who remember the ghetto, Auschwitz confirms the truth they sensed but could barely articulate. The ghetto was never meant to be endured. It was meant to prepare. Yet some survive. Against all odds, they endure camps, death marches, liberation. They emerge into a world that has moved on, often without them. When the war ends, Krakow is still standing. Its buildings intact, its streets familiar. But for Jewish survivors who return, if they return at all, the city is unrecognizable. Homes are occupied by strangers. Synagogues are empty or destroyed. Neighbors avert their eyes. The silence that once followed liquidation now follows survival. Many survivors do not return. They leave Poland entirely, unable to live among ghosts, unable to reconcile the city they loved with the one that allowed them to be erased. Others stay briefly, searching for family members who will never be found. Lists are checked. Names are spoken aloud in hope. Most are answered only by silence. The Krakow Ghetto does not receive immediate memorialization. There are no monuments erected by those who destroyed it. No plaques placed to mark where children were shot, where families were torn apart, where a community vanished. For years, memory survives only in survivors' voices, in testimonies whispered or written down with shaking hands. The city moves forward, but something unresolved lingers beneath its surface. Trials come later. Amon Goth is arrested, tried, and executed. His crimes are documented, described in chilling detail. The world learns his name. But Goth is only one man. His punishment does not account for the system that empowered him, nor the countless others who carried out orders without consequence. Justice feels partial, incomplete, unable to balance the scale. The story of Oskar Schindler emerges gradually, offering a counterpoint that complicates the narrative. His factory, his list, his workers who survive because he chose to intervene. These stories matter, but they exist alongside the overwhelming reality that for every life saved, millions were destroyed. Rescue does not erase annihilation. It exists within it, fragile and rare. Over time, memory begins to take physical shape. Plaque Gotti is renamed Plaque Bohatero Ghetto, Square of the Ghetto Heroes. Empty chairs are placed in the square, silent and immovable, symbolizing absence. Each chair represents a life that should be sitting there, a family that should still exist. The memorial does not shout. It does not explain. It waits, demanding attention from those who pass through. The ghetto walls no longer stand, but their outline can still be traced by those who know where to look. Streets once crowded with fear now carry ordinary traffic. Children play where others were murdered. Cafes operate where hunger once dominated every thought. This coexistence of past and present is unsettling. It forces a question that has no comfortable answer. How does a city live on top of a grave? For historians, the Krakow Ghetto becomes a crucial case study. It reveals how genocide is not born fully formed, but constructed step by step. How segregation precedes deportation. How bureaucracy enables murder. How violence is normalized before it is expanded. The ghetto shows that extermination does not begin in camps. It begins in neighborhoods. For the Holocaust as a whole, Krakow represents a hinge point, a place where the transition from persecution to annihilation becomes visible, where the methods later perfected in Auschwitz and other camps are tested, refined, and made routine. To understand the camps, one must understand the ghettos. And to understand the ghettos, one must understand how ordinary cities were transformed into instruments of death. Survivors carry the ghetto with them for the rest of their lives, in memories triggered by sounds, smells, sudden silences. In the way hunger never fully leaves the body, even decades later. In the way fear lingers, long after danger has passed. Many speak, many cannot. Silence becomes another inheritance of the ghetto. The children who survived grow up with stories that feel impossible even to themselves. Some dedicate their lives to remembrance, education, warning. Others seek distance, trying to build futures unshackled from a past that threatens to consume everything. Both responses are forms of survival. As decades pass, denial emerges alongside remembrance. Voices question numbers, minimize suffering, distort facts. This, too, is part of the aftermath. The fight for memory becomes as urgent as the fight for survival once was. Museums, testimonies, documentaries exist not because the past is secure, but because it is fragile. The Krakow Ghetto no longer exists as a physical place, but it exists as a warning. It shows how quickly rights can be stripped, how easily neighbors can be isolated, how rapidly violence can escalate when a population is defined as a problem to be solved rather than people to be protected. It demonstrates that genocide is not sudden madness, but deliberate policy. When visitors stand in modern Krakow today, they may hear music, laughter, the ordinary sounds of life. They may walk streets without realizing what once unfolded there. The absence is easy to miss. That is why remembrance matters. Because forgetting does not require malice. It requires only time and silence. The Krakow Ghetto was not the end of the Holocaust, but it was a beginning, a place where the world learned how to disappear people in plain sight, where the mechanisms of extermination were rehearsed long before they reached their final form. Its destruction did not stop the killing. It fed it. To remember the Krakow Ghetto is to confront uncomfortable truths about power, about obedience, about how quickly civilization can fracture. It is to acknowledge that the road to the camps ran through ordinary streets, past ordinary homes, watched by ordinary people. The ghetto is gone, but its shadow remains, stretching forward through history, asking whether the lessons it offers will be recognized or repeated. And that question, unanswered, is the true legacy left behind.